Chairman who is unable to be with us early this morning. He will try to come if he's able to come because ada kematian di kejiranan beliau. Let me just take a few minutes to brief you on our program today, especially the facilities. This is the seminar room. We have, if you need a surau, as you enter from the lift, it's on the left side. Our restroom is just behind this room. As you leave the room, turn to the left and then to the left again. Our meals will be served, as you know, this morning upstairs at the rooftop, and our lunch will also be served at the rooftop. You will just have to take a staircase to the rooftop. Our session today will be streamed live through our FB. So if you need to share the streaming with friends, just let us know. Get the link from our staff. They will assist you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me just pass to Dato Saifuddin for the session today.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First and foremost, I would like to welcome everyone to this roundtable discussion. The roundtable is organized by specifically the Center for Nation Building Studies, which is part of Institut Darul Ehsan. Institut Darul Ehsan has been very kind to ask me to chair the center, because they know that I've got nothing else to do. So, and before I start doing something nasty, they thought I probably can do something. If you allow me a few minutes of background of the center. The center was launched just in November. There are two basic background to the formation of the center. On the one hand is the issue of unity and integration and preventing discrimination in the country. On the other hand, we know how bad politics can be, especially when politics is based on race and religion. And we thought one way out is to try and start thinking about a more multiracial and more moderate political ideas and political thought. So there are the two sides of the coin, as we like to say it, and we are working on two projects. One side of the coin of the project is to explain to Muslims, being the majority in the country, that you have to understand the other and the society. You have to embrace democracy, because that is the system that we have inherited and that we believe in. So we are trying to come up with, the project is called coming up with fiqh of peaceful coexistence, fiqh of at-ta'ayush as-silmi. The other side of the coin is the one that I was referring to. What about politics? So we are trying to come up with a new political thought, which is, in political science, it is known as centripetalism. But basically what we want to do is to come up with political thoughts that is based on, again, multiracial, multireligious, and moderation. So that's the two sides of the coin of the project that we are on. So this roundtable discussion today is a process in the two sides of the coins of project. I hope I'm not confusing people by making that kind of introduction. The topic for today's discussion is reclaiming the center, the role of religion in a multiracial society. Now, if you are wondering where we get the topic from, let me then confess that I actually borrowed the topic from the title of the latest book by Dr. Jasser Auda, Reclaiming the Mosque, the Role of Women in Islam's House of Worship. You know, reclaiming the center, reclaiming the mosque. If you are familiar with this Indian, a very famous Indian actor come producer, Amir Khan, remember last year he produced Dangan, about women, young ladies involved in a sports competition which is very physical in nature, wrestling. Last night, my family and I watched his Amir Khan's latest movie, which I strongly recommend you because that is claiming the center, reclaiming the center. The title of the movie is Secret Superstar, about a young lady, 15-year-old lady, trying to be a singer. The father didn't allow, the society, that kind of story. Indian Uthaya, I won't challenge you on the, you know this story better than anyone else, yeah? So reclaiming the center is about bringing us back to where we are supposed to be, I suppose. It's about moderation. We have had interreligious dialogue in all fashions in the past, both in Malaysia and also in Southeast Asia and at the international forum. In my notes that I have distributed to the members of today's meeting, I have more or less give you an overview of some of the things that we have produced in the past. So we are not starting from zero. But I think our aim today is really to connect the dots. There have so many things have been done in the past. We need to connect the dots. And how do we enrich the works the good works that has been done by many people in the past, here and everywhere else. And even if we cannot do it today, but from today onwards, we can start thinking about how do we translate it into laws, into policies, into programs, or let's put it this way, to be more politically correct, how do we improve whatever laws, whatever programs, whatever policies that we already have. And hence, we have this grouping of distinguished speakers this morning. On my left is Professor Dr. Jasser Auda, a renowned Muslim scholar, a leading expert on Maqasid Sharia. Translated into English would be achieving the higher objectives of Islamic jurisprudence or Islamic law. He has been visiting us in Malaysia for more than a dozen times. Yeah, more than a dozen times. So far, he can still come to Malaysia. I mean, a legal person by training, both in both common law and Sharia. An Egyptian who is now Canadian.
Yeah, let's put it this way.
Yeah, and also a Muslim. So multi-identity. Yeah. He will speak for about 20 minutes to 30 minutes on the idea of reclaiming the center. And then we will have commentaries by a list of distinguished people. Some have indicated they want to speak first, some have indicated they want to speak last. So I will just say that we will have later on about 10 minutes each, starting with YB Hanayo. She is the speaker of the State Assembly of Selangor, the first women speaker in Malaysia. A lawyer by training, second term as a member of the State Assembly,
Reclaiming the speaker.
Reclaiming the speaker, yeah. Okay, and she has written a very interesting book, Becoming Hana, which became a controversy. But that's not the reason why we have you here, you know. We have you here because of your good works in the past as a church person, as an activist, and now as a good politician, inshallah. And then we have other speakers. Since they are seated in that manner, so our second speaker will be Mr. Uthaya Sankar. You probably the youngest on the panel, yeah? Probably you're the youngest. Huh? Yeah, you're only sweet 17. Never mind. He is a writer and author. Also created some controversies in the past for criticizing a novel. I'm sure you remember that story. Yeah. So we have a lot of controversial people here today. An author, an activist rather. Yeah, he heads an organization, Kavyan. Yeah. On his right, our next commentator will be Mr. Yusmadi Yusoff, another lawyer by training. But he's more not so much of a lawyer as in practice, but more as a legal person as in legal thoughts. Betul, if I correctly introduce you. Yeah. He was a member of parliament from Keadilan, from PKR, representing Balik Pulau in Pulau Pinang. He is now heading an international organization of lawyers. Yeah. And then we have Saudara Timing here, representing the Buddhist Association. Yeah, Buddhist Missionary Society of Malaysia, an activist who has been for some of us who have been in the interreligious dialogue, we have met him many times in the past, and he is here today also as one of the commentary. And then we have another not very politically correct person, another controversial guy, KJ John, who went to an elite school called the Royal Military College. I told him I went to the Malay College because I'm Malay, I don't need the Royal. But he spent 32 years as a top government officer. Your last posting was at Maimos. Yeah. He's a blogger now, and he is also heading an organization called Midas, also actively working with the church. Yeah. Our last speaker for today is Dato Abdul Jalil Ali. He is the advisor of Sinar Harian and Karangkraf. Sinar Harian, as you know, is the leading Malay newspaper, one of the leading Malay newspaper, of course. And Karangkraf is the owner of Sinar Harian. By the way, Sinar Harian is the first newspaper that is in the Malay language that is local, with the exception of Sabah and Sarawak. Not yet in Sabah and Sarawak, but in Semenanjung is local. So you have Sinar Pahang, Sinar Terengganu, Sinar Kelantan, and so on and so forth. And Karangkraf, besides Sinar Harian, publishes 20 magazines and have 2 book publishing houses. So it's one of the biggest media conglomerate, and the advisor is here, and we hope he will give his views on the role of media, because we always blame the media, for all the problem that all the politicians make all the problems, and then all politicians and everyone else in this room will blame the media for bringing the problem to the public. Okay, so let's start our discussion proper, if I may. Cordially and most respectfully invite Dr. Jasser Auda.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm really honored to be back in this place and with this panel. I'm looking forward to learn from their views and from their life experiences, and wow, this is a much more intense panel than I expected. I expected the talk with my brothers and Darul Ehsan and a few guests, but this is a seriously multi-racial, multi-religious, multi-walk of life kind of discussion, which makes it as challenging as it makes it, but I'm hoping that we come out with some enlightenment and some knowledge out of this. After thanking, of course, Darul Ehsan and thanking my dear friend Dato Saifuddin for inviting me again, let me start by saying that claiming the mosque, reclaiming the mosque was an attempt to bring Muslim women back to their role in the mosque. But I'm claiming in that book that Muslim women in original Islam, in the time of the Prophet, in the Quran, in the Sunnah tradition of the Prophet, never lost the mosque. They lost the mosque because of what happened from the time of the death of the Prophet afterwards. And they were excluded from the mosque. Eventually, they don't even enter the mosque in many parts of the Muslim world. Here, they do enter the mosque and they do play a role, which is something I really cherish in Malaysia. They are not isolated. It's also something I really cherish. In America and Canada, where we live, in most of the mosques, women are in the basement, what we call the basement in that culture, or in some side room. So we're trying to bring them back to their original place. Reclaiming the center is the same thing. The center is Islam, and Islam is the center. And if we look at the original sources of Islam, we will see that Islam is a centrist message. In fact, the Quran is giving us this terminology. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. In Surah Al-Baqarah, the verse is saying, we made you a centrist nation. So the Muslims are a centrist people by definition, by their scripts. But reclaiming the center is because Muslims lost that center over the centuries, in the far past and in the present. And so it's fitting to say reclaiming the mosque, even though the mosque is always a place for women, as much as we say reclaiming the center, although the center is a place always for Islam. Let me start with a memory that I remembered yesterday when I was talking with some of the youth here, which could explain some of the picture, at least from the Muslim point of view, not Muslim Islamic point of view, but somebody who lived the Islamic experience in the past decades in different parts of the world. My brother said I grew up in Cairo, in Egypt. And I remember taking the religion path, memorizing the Quran, looking for those lecturers back in the 70s of Egypt, and learning from them, growing a mature Islamic Egyptian kind of way of practicing Islam. I remember my grades were starting to get better at school at that time and making more decent friends, growing as a good Muslim. And then I heard that there is a big lecture downtown Cairo. That was 84, eventually. Downtown Cairo, a big lecture, all the roads are open. So I was wondering, well, Islamic lectures are usually with a lot of policing and a lot of that. How come this is something well advertised? And it was given by no less than Sayyaf, the head of the Mujahideen of Afghan of that time. And basically what was happening, and we were thousands, if I can say tens of thousands of kids. If those who know Cairo, from Tahrir Square, there is a Qasr al-Aini street. That street was full of youth going to see that big figure that was advertised and the government was promoting, for us to go see him and see what Sayyaf has to say. And he gave a very emotional speech and introductions and this and that, and they started to recruit Egyptian young men for the Afghani war at the time. And all the emotional stuff about Islam and how it was attacked and how the Muslim sisters in Afghanistan, those atheist Russians, are doing all of that. And I remember thinking seriously about going to Afghanistan and joining the war there. Actually, some of my friends went. Some never came back. And some now are refugees in Europe, in different places, and so forth. Long stories, but alhamdulillah, thanks to Allah, I really changed my mind. I decided to finish my university and go do a PhD. And, you know, I thought that working in academia is much more honorable than fighting and carrying, you know, weapons and so on. And then I thought, with my little mind at that time, a teenager, but no, I was at that time closing to finish my teenage years. So I was thinking, well, it's what do I do after the war? I mean, I really need to get a life, and so I'm glad I didn't go. I wouldn't be here with you now. But that memory of that time where extremism was promoted in the Arab world is a very vivid memory for me, and it's obvious implications and what happened afterwards. And those friends of mine or colleagues at the university who went there and became eventually the Arab Afghan, and what they did for those of them who came back with all sorts of extreme views, that was a start of a new era in the cycle in the Arab world, the cycle of Islam and politics, the cycle of manufacturing extremism for political ends, for kids who grow up as, in my case, Egyptian Muslim kids, just no problem, but they eventually become radicalized, and they think that they are radicalized away from the eyes and the nose of authorities, but we weren't. Eventually, when I went to Canada and then, you know, lived in different parts of the world and so on, and started to understand what happened in the 80s a bit more, I started to realize that this was a big agreement and an international coalition, if you wish, to send all of these extreme kids, religious, Islamic-oriented kind of kids, to go to Afghanistan. If they die, well, good, we got rid of them. If they don't, then when they came back, some of the people I knew at that time, when they came back, they were actually executed in Egyptian airports and so on. What I'm saying is that the center is a natural part of Islam, but it is how we deal with Islam in the public sense, and especially in the political sense, that generates extremism. Let's go back in history to present similar ideas. When there were khalifas, there were caliphs or successors after the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the successors were people who refused at the beginning to even get a salary, Abu Bakr and Umar and so on. So the community, history says, pushed them in order to get a very modest salary for what they do. So Abu Bakr and Umar and eventually Uthman and Ali, history says that they got 2 thobes, those Arab things, one for the winter and one for the summer. They renew them every year, and enough food for the family and so forth. History tells us that Umar, the second Khalifa, did not have enough cloth to make a long thobe because he was a tall guy, so he had to borrow a piece from his son. And then when he stood on the pulpit and gave the Friday sermon, one of the people told him, "Where did you get all of this cloth? Everybody got a shorter one. How come you have a long thobe?" So he said, "Abdullah, the son of Umar, say where I got the other part of the thobe from." But then an Arabic tribe by the name the Umayyads decided to convert that Khilafah, that succession of the Prophet, in serving the people, really. You know, in the history tells us at that time that these people defined themselves as servants of the people, Khadim al-Ummah, servants. But then the leadership transformed from servants to emperors. The name Khalifa continued, the name Amir al-Mu'mineen, the prince of the believer, and so on, continued. But basically, we had an era in the Islamic heartland of converting the succession of the Prophet into an emperor rather than an empire, rather than a servant. And history tells us that the grandson of the Prophet at that time, Imam al-Hussein, decided that this is not right, and he decided to fight against the current regime. Nobody fought with him. He ended up fighting alone with his family and so on. He was killed, of course, in Karbala, in Iraq, and so forth. And the empire continued. The empire decided to limit the role of Islam from defining what is right to defining a very small part of the Muslim life. And therefore, with strategies of carrot and stick, long story, they dealt with the Islamic scholarship in a way to redefine Islam as what we call in Islam ibadat, as acts of worship. So fiqh, or Islamic jurisprudence, at that time, after al-Hussein and Abdullah ibn Zubayr and a few people who died trying to oppose the new system, after that, this chapter of the public affairs, or what we call siyasa shar'iyya, was not discussed in Islam anymore. What was discussed in Islam is how to wash and how to pray, and details on how to do pilgrimage and how to give charity and the percentages and da-da-da. And if you read any of these books, those who studied Sharia here know very well, you study 25, 30 chapters of acts of worship, and then a few very quick chapters, if you get to the end of the book anyway, of, you know, how to deal without usury, and da-da-da. Very, very few chapters that deal with what we call mu'amalat, or worldly dealings. Worldly dealings shrank. They became very small. And the acts of worship, which are part of Islam, don't get me wrong, I'm not against any original part of Islam. You know, I give khutbahs, I memorize the Quran. I'm coming from that part of the world. I'm not a secularist here. But I am saying that the ibadat, the worship part of Islam, which is, everything is worship anyway from the Islamic view, but the pure worship, if you wish, the devotional part, became the main part, and the worldly affairs became very small. Some scholars dared to write books on what they call siyasa shar'iyya, or Islamic political theory, if you wish, or Islamic polity. Eventually, a few books, we know from history, 70, 80 books maximum. Students here who do surveys on books of siyasa shar'iyya, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Khaldun, a few people wrote. But these books had to start by a big and long dedication to the current authority, and that I'm writing this book for the service of that authority. So Islam eventually disappeared from the central position in the public affairs. And this was for the sake of politics of the time, and the continuation of these empires over the centuries, and how they survived politically is by defining a particular role for the fuqaha, for people who did jurisprudence, to deal with these acts of worship, and for the status quo kind of governing force, what we call in the history Sahib al-Sayf, the friend of the sword, or the person with the sword. So the person with the sword is going to take care of the public affairs, and nobody else could say anything about the public affairs because the person of the sword is actually taking care of that. So when we talk about policies in the 80s and 70s and 80s of the Arab world, and all the way until what we see today, it's a very similar thing. We live in a very similar paradigm of politics misusing Islam, redefining it in a certain way in order to play a very complex game. Part of it is to single out people who are going to take a different opinion, and therefore to send them to some war or to persecute them and so forth. And especially people who take a centrist position. People who take a centrist position are much more dangerous for these authoritarian regimes than people who take an extreme position. Because people who take an extreme position are going to be part of the game, because they exist to fight against the extreme position. So the Umayyads of the time, the empire, said that the whole public order is going to be disarrayed if Imam al-Hussein and Imam Abdullah ibn Zubayr and all the companions who tried to stand against the empire. So the empire said that no, we have to defend the people and so forth. So it was easy to kill them off but people who stayed after them, who took a centrist position, like the Imams we know from our history, Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad and Imam Abu Hanifa and Malik. You hear about Muslims being Maliki or Shafi'i or Hanafi or Hanbali. These are after these Imams who appeared at that time. These people were perhaps much more dangerous on the system than people who fought for a few months and got killed and disappeared from history, because they were popular. They represented what Islam is supposed to say, and they spent the rest of their lives having a complex game with the politics of the time. Not a single person of these Imams was not imprisoned and was not tortured. History tells us each and every one of them, the Imams that we hear about in history, including the Imams of the sub-schools or the schools that were not, they didn't continue in scholarly, like Sufyan al-Thawri and Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak and etc. Names would be familiar for students of knowledge here. All of the Imams of the time and people of knowledge, when they opened their mouth really about the public affairs, they see prison and they were persecuted and so forth in the name of transgressing the lines, in the name of Aqidah, sometimes, blasphemy. Yes, exactly. So Imam Ahmad, who was called in our history Imam Ahl Sunnah, the Imam of the Sunni trend, he was beaten and this in prison for a long time because he had a view, and that view was considered blasphemy, right? And the laws of blasphemy were applied to most of the scholars that you read about in Islam. Students of knowledge here, when you study Islam, whom do you study? Ibn Rushd and Ibn Taymiyyah and Al-Ghazali and Al-Suyuti and Al-Razi and all of these people, if you read history, were accused of blasphemy because they were trying to bring Islam, but they were aware of the balance of power, so they never carried the sword like the grandson of the Prophet, and they decided to bring Islam somehow to the public arena, and every time they speak they face these prison sentences and all that. So what do we do in order to do that? I think Maqasid al-Sharia, my brother mentioned that I chair a Maqasid Institute. We have a branch in Malaysia headed by my brother here, Sheikh Marwan. The Maqasid are the higher objectives of the Sharia in the sense of the higher principles, the higher values. What do? We gather around the higher values for the public arena, for the public discourse. There is a deviation, in my opinion, that the Islamic thought had done in the 20th century from the original political philosophy of the Quran. If you open the Quran and read how it dealt with politics, with an open mind, you will see that the Quran is not calling for an Islamic state. The Quran is dealing with the status quo, whatever it is. In the Prophet's stories, which are a reference also for us as Muslims, a prophet, whose prophet Yusoff, Joseph in the biblical sense, was a minister in the king of Egypt of the time. So basically the Quran did not have an issue with the kingdom of Egypt, eventually the pharaonic system. It didn't have an issue with that. But it had an issue with the mischief that the Pharaoh eventually did. Now, if you shift to Moses' story, it didn't have a problem with the system, but it had a problem with the behavior of the Pharaoh. How the Quran says he divided his people in order to rise himself in the land. Quite familiar. So that's basically what happened in America recently. When somebody wants to rise, they divide the people. And the Quran says, very interesting, إن فرعون علا في الأرض وجعل أهلها شيعا يستضعف طائفة منهم. Pharaoh raised himself in the land by fragmenting his people, by dividing his people, and singling out one of them to be the weakest link. يستضعف. So he singled out the children of Israel. Okay, so children of Israel is the enemy. We suffer that in the West. Muslims are the enemy. And Muslims are, poor citizens, most of them professionals, they work in universities, they are doctors. They are not really, they don't have any political agenda or any ambition for anything. American Muslims, poor things, they were cornered. And istadaf, exactly the Quranic word in Arabic, which is singling them out as a weak group. And that's how Pharaoh raised himself in the land, by dividing the community and so on. وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا. Shia is a group. And that is, by the way, when the Shia started in the Islamic history, it was because of that, because they didn't find a political space. And their Imam at that time, or our Imam as Muslims anyway, Imam Ali, when he was killed eventually and so on, they had to go underground and they had to form these hidden sects and eventually developed into very strange ideologies, al-Batiniya, or the hidden beliefs. Long stories, but basically that is how fringe groups appear. With all due respect to our Shia school of thought anyway, but I'm talking about their historical origin, that how they emerged from an environment of persecution of Islam. So they go down. That's exactly again what happened in Egypt back in the 60s and so on, because of the persecution of the thinkers like Sayyid Qutb and others, people when they read, however you interpret them, but they were within the moderate really path, more or less. And we can debate that if you're interested. But the groups that eventually came, Al-Jama'ah Al-Islamiyya and Jihad Al-Islami, people who eventually assassinated President Sadat of the time, people who eventually became the Arab Afghan and so forth, they emerged from the Egyptian prisons of the 50s and 60s. This is a fact. The people who are now claiming to be an Islamic state, they emerged from Abu Ghraib. This is also a historic fact and so forth. So basically, persecution is going to make extremists, and the way to confront that is to go back to the original path, the central path, the path of values, and realize that the Quran and the tradition of Muhammad, peace be upon him, yes, it would be, it is one of the scenarios to have what is called an Islamic state, in the sense that eventually Prophet Muhammad, he was in Mecca when he became in Medina, and eventually Medina was surrounded by all the enemies, and they conquered their enemies. They became an Islamic state, because this is how history took them forward, to make an only Muslim kind of thing. But before that, the Prophet in Mecca did not aim to make a state. In fact, he wanted just to live like everybody else. And he dealt with the Bayt al-Nadwa, or the house of the seminar, like the seminar, the ruling committee, if you wish, of Mecca. He dealt with the ruling committee in a very similar way that Moses dealt with the Pharaoh, even telling them very similar things. Well, just don't persecute the slaves, don't do this, do not carry injustices. At that time in Mecca, he, peace be upon him, formed something called Hilful Fudul, the alliance of the virtuous. So living in Mecca, he did not want to take over or anything. This is not the nature of Islam. He just wanted a party of the virtuous, and he wanted to live peacefully like everybody. He would say, "Khallu bayni wa bayna nas," just let me speak to people. They wouldn't let him speak, and they eventually tried to kill him, so he had to go to Medina. And then in Medina, he told them, okay, just leave us alone. He made an alliance with the Jews of Medina at that time, and if you read the scroll that was written based on that, the scroll says, Al-Muslimuna wal-Yahud ummatun wahida. Muslims and Jews in Medina are one ummah. You see, here is ummah as well, the thing that we as Muslims claim to be only for us. No, the ummah could be a political ummah. So he said with the Jews, we are a political ummah, let's defend Medina, and the Jews are going to live according to the Jewish law, and Muslims, they asked Muhammad about the Muslim law, and they lived in Medina. But had the Jews not tried to assassinate him eventually, he would have lived with the Jews. There is no problem. There is no theological requirement for an Islamic state here. This is not, if we can live within the current polity as Muslims peacefully and cooperatively, there is no requirement to have a state. So he lived, peace be upon him, with the Jews of Medina, with no ambition for anything more than that. But then eventually they tried to assassinate him. He had to flee that scene at that time, and then he came back and fought against them and eventually kicked them out of Arabia because they were trying to assassinate him and trying to take over in that sense. So, and that's how you have a pure Arabia of Muslims at that time, because history led to that point. Now, if we move to current Malaysia, and of course I'm a visitor, so I don't know all the details, but theoretically speaking, from the Islamic perspective that I know, if you reach a system that is stable and fair, my understanding is that you have a constitution, you have a division of states, there is a religious authority that's given to a certain regime, and the political authority given to another regime. There is no requirement from an Islamic point of view to change that. This is fine. But what is not fine is any injustice. What is not fine is any, what we call in Sharia, fasad, or mischief. And mischief is somebody who is hungry, somebody who is assaulted, somebody who is killed. So this is against Islam. What is against Islam is the any lack, if you wish, of rights, any lack of what we call in Islam maslaha, or the public good. The public good is defined in Islam by the preservation of faith. Nobody's faith should be compromised. The preservation of souls or life, the preservation of family, of offspring, the preservation of wealth. Nobody's wealth should be assaulted or compromised, and so on, if the wealth, of course, is legitimate. The preservation of honor and dignity. Every human is dignified, the Quran says, and therefore, so as long as the system is preserving this, then it is fine. There is no requirement for changing that system. You know, the Prophet could have sent one of his companions to kill Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl and Abu Sufyan, you know, the leaders of Mecca at the time, and then go to that tent. It was a small tent in the middle of Mecca. He would go to that tent, and he had enough men with swords, and say, well, this is an Islamic state. This is far from what you read in the history of the Prophet. The Prophet said, fine, you be the leaders of Mecca, but we call you to God. They said, no, we want to continue to worship the idols. He said, all right, but let us worship our God and you worship your idols. That is fine. He didn't even break the idols until he came back to Mecca. And then he said, well, just break the idols. Now Mecca is only for those who worship God. History took him to this point. But when you read and reflect, you will see that a political system that is mixed between religions, between races, is fine with Islam. The Islam doesn't require to change. Islam doesn't have a nation state to start with. This is just a way of organization. Islam views Muslims as one ummah, not as one state, as one nation, as one community. As if you feel for your brother and sister in faith, because you have the same faith, you are close. But it doesn't mean that there are not other kinds of ummahs. There is the ummah of Muslims, but there is the ummah that the Prophet built, the ummah of Jews and Muslims, a federal ummah, if you wish. And there is other kinds of ummahs. There is even, Allah said in the Quran, that the birds and animals are ummamun amthalakum. There is the ummah of birds and the ummah of animals. The community is not necessarily a political entity. The community is a feeling. You feel with the believers. And then in the Muslim sense, you widen the circle and you feel with the people of the book, because their original books are similar to your book. So there are particular exceptions for the people of the book in the Quran, you know, in terms of marriage, in terms of this. So the people of the book, that is circled an ummah, that is wider, the Muslims. And then the circle of humanity. And everybody is a brother for you. Imam Ali, and I will finish with this, a man pushed another man. So Imam Ali told him, why do you do that? He is either your brother in Islam, or your brother in your village, or your brother in humanity. Don't transgress against him. So he's your brother in any sense. Whether he is Muslim from your village, then he is the same like you, or he is a brother in humanity at large. And that is also a brotherhood, sisterhood that is there in the sources. The extreme ideologies take Islam away from that. Obviously, for political reasons, you would know this better than I do. I mean, I'm not a politician, and I'm not as aware as you are in political science and the struggles of power and this kind of thing. But to me, the Quran is actually a very open book to the political systems. It dealt with the system of the pharaohs, for heaven's sake, at that time, approving them, but as long as they don't kill the children of Israel. And there is no requirement here for an Islamic state, especially if we talk about the nation state. The nation state is a way of organizing politics. There is a shift that happened in the Islamic thought from the Islamic state that we know in our history, which is the Khilafah, to something called Islamic state for a nation state. But a nation state, especially if it is multiracial, cannot be Islamic in the same sense. We cannot elect a Khalifa and so forth. And I give you a bit of history as well about how the Khilafah long ago, 40, 50 years after the Prophet, had deviated from the right path into an empire. Of course, it had its positive parts, but it had many negative parts that we suffer from until today. So it's not really a requirement a la the Ottomans or a la the Umayyads or Abbasides or Ayyubides or any of these guys. It's not a requirement. It is a requirement perhaps a la Abu Bakr or Umar. But if Abu Bakr and Umar lived today, as they lived in Mecca, they would have built coalitions, built the alliance of the virtuous that they built back in Mecca, and just cared about justice. Muhammad told them, with the alliance of the virtuous, all we care about is justice. So if anybody is transgressed, if anybody loses a right, then he or she comes to the alliance of the virtuous, and the alliance of the virtuous is going to get them their rights. But the alliance of the virtuous was not a party that decided to compete for the leadership. The leadership could be whatever it is. That is, in my view, the Islamic view here. And I'm hoping that these remarks would open some discussion. Again, thank you very much for inviting me again. And I'm on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jasser Auda. You claim that you are not a politician, neither am I. Never trust politicians. I think that was a very enlightening opening for the roundtable discussion. I like the way he ended his presentation by alluding to the alliance of the virtuous. Yeah, I think this is what we are trying to do, or at least that's part of the thing that we are trying to do. A coalition or alliance of the virtuous. Okay, so next we will go to the second round of today's discussion. We will be inviting our panel, our commentators, as I said earlier, each for about 10 minutes each. I must inform you that YB Hanayo actually asked to speak first because she has to attend to her her daughter's. She's attending. She's participating in the competition, and she's 12. She's 6. Wow! I remember this is your first kan, yang sulung. You remember the story when she was born, and Hana wanted to register her as a Malaysian instead of she's Chinese, her husband is Indian. So instead of registering the normal, like I'm in my IC, in my ID, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Malay. So both Hana and her husband wanted to register the kid, their daughter as Malaysian. Okay. Not without the ethnic identity, and they couldn't do it. And that's worthy of writing. I think you should. I know you wrote about it. I think, but I think these are some of the experience that some of us have to undergo in trying to becoming more virtuous. Yes. Silakan, YB.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor and Datuk Saifuddin and everybody present. I'm here to just give a bit of perspective on how religion, since everybody understands it as faith, how it helped me become a better politician in the works that I do. Just some very basic background. I didn't grow up as a Christian. I only became a Christian at the age of 18, 19 in college and in university. So I grew up in Subang Jaya. I was raised in a Taoist home. When I became a Christian, my mindset, everything about how I view life changed for me. And I actually put all that in my book. It's too long to share. But like many young Malaysians, I actually wanted to migrate and seek a better life in Australia. Okay, I think in my mind, I thought at that time that being in Australia, I would earn more money, and I would be able to send back money to my parents to repay my parents for the education that they provided for me. But I was not, my PR application was not approved in Australia, and I had to come back. Now when I came back, when I started working, that's when I was exposed to politics. Because when you are not working and you're not paying tax, it actually doesn't hurt you. Whatever happens in politics, it actually doesn't make you angry. But when you start earning money and you earn 1,800 ringgit, and 800 goes to paying for your car, petrol, and you have to stay with your parents and still have not enough savings, you start to question, where are the resources in this country? Why do we have such bad management of the resources that we have? So that was when I was asked to consider and to join politics, and I did. Now, when I joined politics, I had to resolve some inner conflicts within me. And I had to resolve that with God first. The first one was, when I became a Christian, I realized that from studying the Bible, that God is a jealous God, that I shall not worship any other God but Him. Now, being a politician would require me to attend to events or to attend, to be in places of worship that I was not comfortable in. Okay, going to a mosque is not familiar for me, to a temple, or even to a place where they don't acknowledge God. And so these were some of the inner struggles that I had I had to have conversation with God and say, if you really want me to enter politics, you got to help me resolve this, because if it's not resolved within me, it will be reflected in the things I say, and it can offend people when they invite me. Okay, so that inner conflict we all have to deal with. And so for me, I went to search the scriptures and find a resolution. And so I discovered that there are only two commandments, two greatest commandments that I have to uphold. Number one is to love your God with all your heart and your mind and your soul. So to love God wholeheartedly. Number two is to love my neighbor as I love myself. Okay, and so when I look at these two greatest commandments, I realize that it's actually not difficult to do. Okay, and so when I receive invitation to attend to temples and all that, I have to fulfill both commandments, which means I cannot make God upset and I cannot make the people upset. How do I find that balance? And so I had a conversation with all the chairmen of the temples and the masjid and surahs, and they are very understanding that I'm a Christian. There are things that I just cannot participate in, especially religious ceremony, because they have significance. And so when I go and I attend events, I attend all the kind of events in Subang Jaya, I will give them an address, a speech as the state assemblyman for Subang Jaya. I will give them the allocation they need that is accessible as a taxpayer. But I will not participate in those ceremonies because I need to fulfill the first commandment. And so far, thank God, there have been peace. People understand that and people respect that. I have never been forced to do anything in a mosque or in a temple which I'm not comfortable in. So because of that, I find reclaiming the center, if we uphold these commandments, understanding and respecting each other, there will be peace. And nobody is asked to compromise anything. But at the same time, if we treat people like how we want to be treated, it will be okay. And so, one specific example, there was a relocation of a surau in my area in Sunway. And I went to negotiate together with the committee of the surau, to negotiate with the developer to get a better surau for them. And I went for the meetings 8 times at night, sitting under the pondok to negotiate with the developer for the surau. And so the surau committee, from that time onwards, they understood that just because you are a Christian doesn't make you anti-Islam or anti-Sharia. And how a Christian rep who fears God, who understands these commandments, will actually do her job and fight for their rights. And so we got them a better surau. And you know how you love your neighbor as you love yourself. Just like how I would want a Muslim MP to fight for my church, I will do the same for his or her surau. The other thing is the allocation. Allocation must be for everybody, and we cannot deprive, one faith because I'm not of the same faith, so I starve you. I don't give you allocation. That's wrong. Now, number 2, the fear of God, being religious, keeps me clean in areas where the public cannot see. I'm a public figure, so whatever I do in public, you see and you will assess. But what about the things that I do in secret that you don't see? How I approve allocation? What if I put in paperwork that are fake? And a lot of politicians do things like that. 10%, 20% commission, right? But the fear of God will keep me clean, because even though public cannot see it, God sees it and God will not be pleased. I give you one specific example. Just the last general elections in 2013, okay? Election was, Parliament was dissolved in March, election was in May. In January, I was heavily pregnant with my second baby. I was going to give birth in February. All prepared after 5 years, going for re-election in Subang Jaya. In January, on the 2nd January, I discovered that one of my staff who was handling welfare programs had cheated the entire office. She faked signatures, she plagiarized, and she claimed monies that didn't belong to her. Okay. Now, when I discovered that 5 years of hard work, if you expose this now, I'm here to fight corruption, but this happened in my office. How do you answer to people? Do you sweep it under the carpet because election is so near, or do you remain consistent and do what you do with BN? You lodge a police report and you expose it. So I had to think carefully, because it's just not me, my entire party, everybody is affected. And after praying and seeking God, I had peace to report to police because I have to be consistent in my fight against corruption and take responsibility for it. So I lodged 3 police reports against my staff. It was very, very stressful because I was going to give birth the next month. All my campaign materials, we were all ready, but I was willing to pay the price. So I spoke to the party and I said, even if it means losing the election or not being fielded, that's okay because we have to be consistent. And if I'm not consistent, God sees it. And when you are not consistent, you will lose authority to do the very things that you fight to do. And so I exposed it, lodged police report, came out in the media, and my staff was sentenced to jail. Now, because of that episode, my opponent in Subang tried to talk to the press, tried to turn it around, but it didn't have any sting because I was the one who exposed it. And thankfully, through that, the people of Subang Jaya rewarded me with a higher majority, double the majority of what I got in 2008. And so I think that the fear of God is very important. And that's why in my book I talk about, hey, Christians, come back home and serve politics because we need to reclaim politics for righteousness, not for Christianity, but for righteousness. Because for the longest time, a lot of churches have stayed away from politics in Malaysia because they think politics is dirty, Christians don't have anything to do with it. Okay, but we all need everyone, Muslims, Hindus, Taoists, people who fear God to be in politics. Then you will never have corruption. You know, you don't need the AG to come and check. They know that God is watching. Okay, leadership by example. I think being religious, you look at your God and you model it in your servanthood. So you have to work. I believe in miracle. I believe in the divine, but I also believe in hard work. Yeah, if I don't work, there will be no results. Okay, so I have to. When you lead a team as a politician, you have to show by servanthood. You know, you model after your God. Whatever your God does, you do. Okay, and I think that's when people can see your religion. The problem with people cannot reconcile religion to what they see being practiced will lead to a lot of confusion. So a lot of people there are bad Christians as well who don't model God correctly, and people look at it and think, okay, all Christians are like that. It's not true. Okay, so I think human has to be blamed. Now the last thing I want to say is being religious or being spiritual helps me to look at election and look at political the work of nation building, not just limiting it to every 5 years. The commitment must be greater than just winning elections, and that's why I go everywhere in churches to preach about how, you know, when we talk about reclaiming politics for righteousness, it's not just about changing government in Putrajaya. It's really about how we need to see crime rate drop. We need to see education being prioritized in our budget. All these kind of things will reflect on the religion that Malaysia upholds. There's no point in calling ourselves a religious nation when we are known for corruption. It brings shame. It brings shame to the nation. You know, so I think as a Christian, the inner conflicts have to be resolved first. Yeah, otherwise it will be reflected outside. And number two, I really don't think that we as lawmakers can actually impose our belief on anyone. I already started receiving questions by young people of all faith. You know, what do you think about LGBT rights? What do you think about abortion? Because Subang Jaya is the education hub, so a lot of students come. And I would say the threat to any religion, not just Islam but Christianity and all that, is the technology that has come in. People are exposed to so much information and so many different cultures. Education is the key for us to reclaim anything. I think giving people the right information, and don't stop them from seeking information. That's very important. So I cannot say stop going to all these places, don't Google the internet, you know, just listen to what's being preached in church. It just doesn't work. Forcing people to come to church also doesn't work. You know, just because they sit there doesn't mean they are good Christians. It's about what is being practiced. So those are just my thoughts about reclaiming, you know, the middle ground here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the other thing I like about YB Hana is because she knows how many basketball courts are there in Subang Jaya. No. I mean that's. But I'm serious. I'm a basketballer, and she understands basketball very well.
She know my surah.
So she has two testimony already, you know. Okay, thank you, YB Hana. I know you have to go, but feel free to stay and leave as and when you need it. Can we now invite Saudara Uthaya?
Okay, thank you, Dato Saifuddin. Let's start with what Dr. Auda mentioned just now. It's something very beautiful, and how I wish we can hear more such things about Islam being spoken by Malaysians, because we always hear things which are very selected things from Quran, because from the way Doctor explained, we can see how beautiful it is. And as for YB Hana, I've heard so much about you. I think this is the first time we are meeting. I have relatives in Subang Jaya area. Now I know why they're voting for you. Okay, I'll be speaking from the experience of myself and from Kumpulan Sasterawan Kavyan, a group of Indian writers who write in Bahasa Malaysia. Since 2010, we deal with activities related to language, literature, welfare, arts and cultural events. That's our area. So since 2010, we have a convoy Rumah Ibadat, where we convoy from houses of worship. We select 6 places, which would be a masjid, a Hindu temple, a Buddhist wat, a church, Tokong, and what's the next one? What did I miss? There should be 6. Okay, we have done it in Seremban, in Kuala Lumpur, in Shah Alam.
If you translate that into English, it would be convoy of in Malay
places of worship. Convoy to places of worship.
Convoy to places of worship.
Houses of worship.
Yeah. Okay. Houses of worship.
Yeah. So it's not a big event. It's in a small group, maximum 20 people of multi-religious, multiracial, and I find it very happening, because we have youngsters coming and joining us, and they're all very eager not to question, but they say that this is one chance where we can go to 6 different places of worship, houses of worship, and get to know. Okay, there's no preaching done. It's just we have a lot of questions. For example, these are the normal questions. When you see a temple, if you're a non-Hindu, you'll be wondering, what is that? Why is this there? So this is a chance for you to openly ask, and a Hindu person will be there to explain in simple English, simple Bahasa Malaysia, or Mandarin, or Tamil, whichever is required. And we also have forums, small-scale forums and dialogues of, we call it, to be safe from Jakim, Jais and all that, we just call it Forum Agama Minority. So we have non-Islamic religion. It's nothing against Islam, because we don't want to be caught by Jais coming to our doorstep and questioning, why are you talking about Islam? So it gives a chance for people from the minority religion to openly discuss, to explain what their religion is about. Things like what YB Hana just explained to us, her experience as a Christian. So a person of a Baha'i person would be able to explain why they become a Baha'i and what are the basic teachings in their religion. Then, since it's a writers group, Kumpulan Sasterawan Kavyan, we write in Bahasa Malaysia, we use fiction, or we even write pantun and essays to explain about religion and culture. No preaching. Again, it's nothing to do with preaching, because we have a lot of people questioning. For example, one question which I've been asked since I was 6, that's when I can remember, why is it that Hindus don't eat beef? I got fed up of explaining, and I wrote an article, and I wrote that in Free Malaysia Today, and that was one of the articles which was heavily shared by people on Facebook, by different religion. When I meet people, hey, say Uthaya, you are the one who wrote about lembu, right? Yeah, because not in a negative manner. They say, hey, it was very, very educational. Now we have the understanding, so we use fiction, essays, writings to convey the messages to have a better understanding. As I mentioned earlier, our activities are about language, literature, welfare, because a lot of Indians come asking for welfare, and we have arts and culture. And all these activities are done in Bahasa Malaysia. because our stand is Kavyan, we want to make sure that nobody feels that somebody's talking behind our back. So as long as it's done in Bahasa Malaysia, even though they have a performance of Ramayana, it would be in Bahasa Malaysia, and everybody will understand, and there's no misunderstanding or misinterpreting or thinking that they are doing something behind our back. Even when there's a discussion about the forum that I mentioned, the minority religion, is done in Bahasa Malaysia or with a little bit of English, so that everybody knows that there's nothing going, nothing negative is happening in the discussion. I personally also face what Dato mentioned about a hero in his paper about hate spin. I consider myself not as a Hindu but a multi-faith person, because I enjoy reading about every religion. So when I write about Malays, the Malays say, "Oh, you're offending me." When I write about Islam, say, "Oh, you're offending me." People get offended. That's the hate spin, right? And when I write about Tamil school, say, "Oh, you hurt me." And when I write about Indians, "Oh, you hurt me." So I'm very happy that I'm able to create arguably the most hated Malaysian writer. That's what I say on my Facebook. But then? All in one. Everybody has the right to hate me. Okay, and from my experience, from Kavyan's experience going to the grassroots, meeting people either in Tamil school, Chinese school, Sekolah Kebangsaan, meeting a Malay kampung, a Tamil estate area, we see that actually there's no problem in the grassroots. For people of different races, different religion, different faith, or different mazhab, there's no problem. But when we come higher, this is from my observation, higher, when politics gets involved, we have the divide and rule, which was also mentioned by Dr. Auda just now, where it's a religion or race is being used to divide so that you get the political power. That's where the problem happens. And we, as the group of writers, Indian writers writing in Bahasa Malaysia, we try to get back to the center, about the tolerance, about the interaction between the different races, different religion, through our creative writing. Another thing that I always notice is that we need to have the readiness to be questioned and criticized. We have this problem. We have to admit among the Malays or the Muslims in Malaysian context. Since Muslims are the majority, Malay Muslims are the majority, there is a feeling that no, you don't have the right to question me. You have to just follow, you have to obey, you have to understand. It's always one way. Okay, a non-Muslim must understand a Muslim. Okay, or a non-Malay must understand a Malay. Hey, let's try the other way, which was also mentioned by Dr. Auda just now, where as a Muslim or as a Malay, try to understand a non-Malay's culture or a non-Muslim's culture. You don't have to go into detail. For example, why doesn't a Hindu eat beef? Just understand and respect that. Okay, that's what we also need. We try to do that under Kavyan through our dialogues and our forum of the minority religion. At the same time, we also, as the Kavyan Writers Group, we also need to, what we are doing is also re-educate the Hindus. We have a problem there. Are we going to educate them in Tamil? By writings in Tamil, because we have to admit, yeah, we have 55% of Malaysian Indians going to Tamil school, but we also have a big majority of Indians not going for Tamil school. They also need to have the link with the Hindu teachings. Okay, if it's done in English, it might not reach them fully. Tamil might not reach fully, but when we write in Bahasa Malaysia, there's another question, and now we might have to ask Dewan Bahasa dan Pustaka to do the translation before it's being approved. Whereas we have Indian writers in Malaysia, Hindu writers, who are able to retell the teachings of Hinduism in Bahasa Malaysia, and I can safely say that my group of writers, when we write about Hinduism, we take into consideration that this article is going to be read by Hindus and non-Hindus, and we make sure it doesn't offend anyone. That's a sort of going back to the center that we need, where we have a very, very friendly, very understanding discussion among our different religious people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saudara Uthaya. Okay. Another lawyer. Saudara Yusmadi, silakan.
Terima kasih Datuk Saifuddin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. First of all, I feel honored to be given opportunity to speak in front of all distinguished guests, especially KJ John. Now, the reason I say is that with reasons, because the setup was so, I would say, strategic. Start with the guy from Egypt, second with the guy from Malaysia, from Temerloh.
Not from Egypt anymore.
No, from Egypt anymore.
I'm Canadian.
Canadian.
Oh, Canadian. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, I don't have Egyptian passport.
From the Arab, from the Middle East.
Just to correct that.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. I'm wrong. So and then Yeoh, and then my brother Uthaya, and I'm from Subang, and myself Yusmadi from Balik Pulau. The reason why I said that there's a very important and ultimate plus with John, because it may reflect something what we're going to say. I just came back from Doha for a very interesting conference, and to my surprise, the topic is I was asked to speak on East Asia, the future of the Middle East. Oh, it's big. So it's big, you know, it's a big subject. But when I ask again, what is the underlying reasons for these questions? And also when I was asked to speak for these sessions, I tried to think deeply, what is the underlying thinking on the framing of the questions, reclaiming the center. For me, it must be certain reason why my learned brother, I know him, is not just another, he says he's not politician, but I wish him all the best. I hope he's the future of Malaysia, inshallah. The reason I say that, because I see, in fact I spoke to KJ John, I have only 3 points to make. 3 points. Point number one, what is happening, at least in this part of the world, at least for the last 60 years, at least. I don't want to go deeper. Last 60 years, when John and a few others, Tun Razak, Tengku Rahman, tried to think deeply what would be the right way, not the best way, at that time, the right way, to develop this country. So the total effect of all these 60 years experience, post-colonizations, have formed certain idea of modernizations or modernity. And the big question is that, where all this come from? Of course, the simple analogy is that the reflection is from European Enlightenment, and the closest is that British model. And it's been translated into Constitution. And Dr. Jasser Auda was very correct to say it must be translated into certain forms and Constitution. Number two, it's been translated into many other things. For example, Fifth Malaysia Plan, so on and so forth, and been translated into Rukun Negara. Rukun Negara for Dr. Jasser Auda is a kind of like an offshoot after 1969 riots. So the founding fathers, the thinkers at that time had two things. One is the cohesive ideas to engage, I would say, the dynamic at that time, somehow translated into something very, very negative at that time. And they succeed, I have to say they succeed. And we translated into new economic policy. I have to say they succeed, partly. Now the question is this, lead to my second point. The question been asked in 2017 now, in the 21st century. Whatever Brother Jasser Auda mentioned just now is very important, because we need to understand the historical context, where all these ideas come from. So for me, it is important to understand where this come from, but more important also to find out how does this agitation, because I always believe agitation is prerequisite to wisdom. When you don't agitate, when you say injustice, when you say poverty, when you see inequality, something wrong with our wisdom. But I believe out of the agitation, this question being framed. So my response to the presentation by Professor Auda is this. He mentioned many things, but what attracted me is, number one, is the path of values. Number two is the alliance of virtues. And also number three, public goods. He was talking about that, and also constitution. The reason why I asked, and justice, that was the higher, which really go to all my brainstem. Why I say this is important? It lead to my third point. All these things, historical, dynamic, whatever, must be translated to the language of today. The language of today stands in a very clear framework. It must stand within the framework of democracy, at least, unless someone try to argue something else. Number two, it must stand in the framework of development. Development, that's why I talk about modernity. And last, at least for my purpose, I believe it must stand within the framework of the rule of law. And the very question, whose rule of law? I used to do it purposely, the rule of law. That what built this country, or the history that in Egypt, when you say rule of law, it means something else. When I say in Malaysia rule of law, it means something else. If I say in UK, it means something else. Okay, it lead me to the last point, which I would love to encourage this session round table, because to take Abang Din, actually I have to call it Abang Din. No, it's so long. Because
he was trying to make me feel older.
So yeah. Because he said that the very purpose of this round table is also with the ambitious attempt to form fig of peace coexisting. And number two, I have to say, I've encouraged him also, I applaud this session, towards new political thoughts. So I have to say this with full of, again, rookie, unscrupulously sometimes, young politicians. That's why I become only one term. Don't take me seriously, I become only one term. Don't believe whatever I said. At least Hana become second term. All right. Malaysia modernization experience has its potential for the emergence of new, modern, Asian, human civilization. What I mean by that is this. Correct if I'm wrong, Brother Jasser, Auda, because you travel east and west, I'll do the same as well. I couldn't find any other place in the world whereby major civilization, at least we are fortunate enough to be given a chance by the higher justice up there. These are the words. The Muslim, the Christian, the Indian, that's why I say European. Only in this part of the world, this is the keyword. The interaction, the social interactions is happening, these are keywords, in the mainstream. I couldn't find. In Middle East, it's not a mainstream, some are very fringe. In Indonesia, with 90 plus majority Muslim, they're not. Some other guys may feel they're not even minority, they're fringe. Minority, fringe, all right. So the very question now is this. What is happening to this country for the last 60 years? We take that contemporary modern experience. I don't want to take the Malacca experience because it's too long. Why I said that? Because Malaysia has that potential, and assuming this very attempt today, berapa bulan ni? 18 hari bulan, 18, is actually the historical attempt where the new modern Asian civilization or human civilization emerged. I think it's great things. For me, I have to say this with full of conviction. We have a chance to do it. But in order to do it, how to do it? So, of course, Mandin, I'd like to say it again, because I wrote about this when I was in US in 2006. The article called In Search for Common Ground, A Journey of Young Muslim Lawyers. Actually, the history how I left Balik Pulau with a mindset, parochial mind, the back of island, have to compete with Georgetown, the victim of modernization, urban and they call it a rural dichotomy. You break the baggages of the kampung boy to go and compete in Georgetown. People assume I have to speak sounds like some mama in Georgetown. I'm not. I'm from Balik Pulau. I look different. And then number two, in that particular book, I also said about how UIA was such a brilliant idea, is a commitment of a few thinkers, how to introduce the common law and the Islamic law together and produce someone like us. But at the same time, when I've learned all those things, somehow, before reformasi, things happen, certain injustices. How come? Best so-called Muslim-oriented country, serious injustice happen, someone can be punched, someone can be removed, strong allegation can be made. What modernization is this? Again, mischievous, injustice, something not right. If any, whatever, as I praise the 60 years or 50 years experience, it just go down to the drain. What more with the corruption? Okay. And also, it go to a step further, intellectually, I find, look here, whatever I learned in university, somehow, is difficult to be applied. Lina Joy issue, Article 121A, the issue of Indian minority, the Hindraft. Yeah, so no, I'm sorry. Why I say this? Again, that is a parochial. See,
This
when
is
I
a
do
different Uthaya.
this is so. It lead me to say again, the flip of the coins of these topics is actually very dangerous. While it is promising, but very dangerous, abandon. Because when you say reclaiming, you are assuming certain rights to reclaim. You must have certain right before you can claim what more to reclaim. Because once guy say in one speech, reclaim land, reclaim land. Someone has no right over reclaim land. I don't understand that. That is coming from the number one of this country. I don't want to go on that. Right? I don't understand that. Because in Penang there's an attempt for reclaim land. But the flip of the coins of this notion is very dangerous. Are we claiming this, reclaiming the center, or actually the centrality? There's two different things. At least at the regional level, I have to say, I argue at different forum. What is happening in this country, in this region, despite so many complaints from the Westerner, somehow it remains the most stable region, this region, the Southeast Asia. ASEAN is not so structured, non-interference, so many other things, but it become stable. So someone argued there is a centrality of that. And what that centrality? So I say in my own word, maybe Al-Shatibi used this word last years back, he called muwafaqah. Malay call muwafakat. Indonesia call mufakat. There's a Malay saying, I say Malay first, then I try to translate. The Malay say, bulat air kerana pembentung. Bulat kata, or bulat manusia kerana muwafakat. Can you imagine water can become rounded the moment it go through a bamboo or culvert, and when it pass the bamboo, it remain as water. Nobody even try to change your character. John can remain as John. You don't have to change to Dato or whatever. I'm okay. I'm sorry I have to use it. In English, it means simply this. Professor Jasser, maybe in Islamic teaching philosophy, you can share this something. Because I find in Indian philosophy, a friend from China, from Chennai, give me that. He says this: water is shaped as it flows through the bamboo or the culvert. Agreements are shaped as it forms through consensus. But when I go deeper, I'm not English speaking, I'm just balik pulau boy. Actually, to translate muafakat to consensus is not right. To translate muafakat to cooperation is not correct. To translate muafakat to agreement is not complete. It's beyond that. For me, in the Islamic history, just as good as when Prophet Muhammad was asked to agree with Hudaybiyah agreement. Legally, all the term is not to Muslim favors, but he has a bigger agenda. The security, the peaceful, whatsoever, but they move on. So for me, muafakat is the idea of democracy in this part of the world. And I urge Oxford Dictionary to adopt these words the way they adopt the words amok. Amok is not riots, amok is not commotion, it's just a very eastern part of this world. Maybe Sinar can promote this, because they're locally inherent media. We need, because otherwise you still have to subscribe to the very language and term imposed as what we talk about, where all these words militants, moderation, fundamentalist, it doesn't come from us. In fact, it's not even in our dictionary in the first place. So it has to have that kind of commitment. So the last point I want to make is this: how this thing can happen? For two things, the two signs have to be encouraged. Like today, we have to encourage more interaksi, interaction, bukan emotion, bukan emosi. Tapi my friend go a step further, he make a joke. Kadang-kadang ereksi. The word call is a joke, erection. So what I'm saying is that the rule number one, if you translate this, have to encourage more interaction. And the interaction, it may start initially from here, and then goes to up to here, and then lastly it goes up to here, to the higher agenda. And the last part, the second part, the science of it is that you have to encourage more collaboration. If I and Uthaya, and I and Hanayo, I and Dr. Jasser, and I and John start collaborating after active interaction and interaction, something bigger, then only then it becomes muwafaqah. You will never achieve muwafaqah when there is no interaction, when there is no collaboration. And I have to say that is the mistake of the current government of the day. There's no genuine interaction been designed at the educational, at economic, at entrepreneur, I say genuine. And number two, we hardly even see even a real, genuine collaboration. Why I say this, I want to end with what President Kalam said. I was in Singapore Global Dialogue. President Kalam was a keynote speaker. His speech entitled "The Confluence of Civilization." You know, you have a scientist talk about civilization, like John wrote about dignity. To my surprise, he said that, look here, he was asked by the Prime Minister of India. He's a top scientist from India, by the way, you know, he's a Muslim. Kalam, go to Russia, collaborate with the best scientists from Russia. From there, that's why now India have that science. That's why now you see Chennai, you know, Bangalore, even it's a recent phenomenon, but that's the framework. I stood up, I said, President Kalam, I will never touch India if I don't understand Mahabharata. I will never touch China if I don't understand Sangho Yangi, the Three Kingdom. But what was all this? Suddenly, you know, he come in, he respond very simply, Yusmadi, this is about collaboration of the core competence for virtue of character towards a bigger agenda for the humanity. So that's what President Kalam said to me. So with that end, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. When you talk about cooperation and collaboration, I think some of us may be familiar with another group of people. I'm not sure, do we have FGIS people here? Friendship Group for Interfaith Services. They have started working on projects with the kids. You have a children orchestra? Children orchestra for what? 10 years? Almost 10 years already. Okay. Please feel free later on to share some of the FGIS good work. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Saudara Mai. Ya, silakan.
Testing. A very good morning to Datuk Saifuddin, Prof. Jasser Auda, and my fellow discussants. Allow me to share a little bit, maybe from the Buddhist perspective. In fact, I grew up in a traditional Chinese family. So with the what we call it, the traditional belief of Chinese that normally they will just bakacholok, you know, that offering the incense sticks and pray to the what we call that, the gods of the Chinese gods, or the as well as ancestors. So when I was 11, that I had an opportunity to learn a little bit about Buddhism. Then later I became a Buddhist, and when I was a kid, I was very aggressive and a very aggressive person, okay, who always have conflicts or fight with others. But after becoming a Buddhist, it changed. It changed my attitude. So this is what make me that feeling that religions have a very good play a very good role in developing the positive characteristics or personality of a person. So talking about interfaith, I've been in fact, the first encounter with interfaith, it was in year 2000 at the Pure Life Center. I think Dato Saifuddin is one of the office bearers, important office bearer of INSAF at that time. So it was after the 9/11 attack. So for me, it was wow, amazing. Okay, at that time, I knew that, wow, from different religions, it was about extremism after the 9/11 attack and radicalism, how to counter all this. And it was amazing. Wow, every major religion in Malaysia or in the world, okay, teaches or guide us, okay, towards how to promote harmony. And every religion against radicalism and extremism. So until then, I joined from the grassroots level and up to the national level of a Buddhist organization, which is from the Young Buddhist Association in Malaysia. I see that religion plays a very important role in promoting a positive manner or a positive livelihood, okay, for people. Then when so I started to, but I still didn't have opportunity to what we call that to involve in interfaith until I became the Vice President of Young Buddhist Association Malaysia in 2014. I was invited to become one of the panel to share on economic developments from religious perspective, and I was representing the Buddhist community, and I was quite nervous at that time because it was not my expertise, since I was a graduate of I was graduated from a physics degree. So asking a scientist to talk about economics might be very challenging, but I still managed to do it. So, but from there, I started. It was my first beginning to become a panelist, and then I continue to contribute to the interfaith communication, not only as becoming panelist, but also involved in the as organizers that through my involvement in Malaysian Youth Council, and also with BMSM, Buddhist Missionary Society, that I represent today. So I found that it's very meaningful that I meet a lot of what we call that knowledge, intellectual people, a lot of good people who are peace-loving, who love to promote peace. And from organizing, I found that I'm doing something meaningful, that we are trying to connect religions, major religions, or not only major religions of the world, looking at the similarities, and let's set aside all the differences of the theological aspect, but we look at the common values, and together we are creating ambassadors of peace. We are creating people who to disseminate the message to the public. So so this is some of the background of my my personal experience in this what we call that interfaith. So let's come in terms of the roles of religion. I think no matter from experience dealing with interfaith programs, what I gain normally maybe I could conclude that the roles of religions in no matter in promoting peace or in the multiracial society, the first thing is aligned also with the Buddhist teaching that to purify the minds. Do no evil, do all good, purify your minds. That's the teaching of all Buddhas. So it agrees with no matter you are a Christian, a Muslim, a Hindu. I think this is a major. This is the objective of all the religions. The common ground, that firstly to purify the mind, and two, to promote good ethical conducts, that everyone by knowing and practicing your religion, you could have, then by practicing it, then you will have a good ethical conduct. And secondly, no matter which religion, they always mention about the world and the afterworld, the life and the afterlife. So we cannot separate ourselves from the current life. So in order how to live our current life in a happy manner, in a peaceful manner, this is very important. In some religion, maybe the afterlife depends on what we do in when we are living our current life. So for Buddhism and as well as other religion, and in Buddhism, there are some aspects that. There are three aspects that we are covering, and it could be translated into the Eight Noble Path. So the first thing would be the ethical conduct. The second thing is mental development, how we develop our mind through practicing of mindfulness, concentration, and the right effort. And third thing, by having mental and ethical development, we could lead to wisdom. So to understand the correct understanding about what's the world about, what's the truth, what is the reality of the nature. And so in terms of so I think I do not need to elaborate much on this. Let's go to, and in terms of politics, as I think just now Prof has mentioned that there are some in the current history or the previous history, there are politics used as a tool use religion as a tool to promote some political agendas or for some personal gains or political gains. That these are some of the causes that cause disharmony or radicalism and extremism. So in terms of from the perspective of Buddhism, Buddhism do not encourage to use religion as a tool to promote political agenda. So we do not use religion to push any political policy or something. However, there are some recommendations for the rulers in Buddhism that we call the 10 duties of the king. So now, when there is no in country with no king of the constitutional monarchy system, we could say there are the duties for the government to take care of the people. So in Pali language they call the Dasa Raja Dhamma, but the framework I think would be similar to other religions that concentrate on the liberty, generosity and charity in terms of a high moral character, in terms of sacrificing. The government has to sacrifice their own good for the good of the people, which is what we call that compatible or agreeable to the maslahah, the concept of people interest. And the same thing, honesty and integrity, kindness and gentleness, and leading a simple and moderate life, freedom from envy, ill will or enmity against anybody else, non-violence, patience, tolerance, understanding, and non-opposition, no obstructions. I think these are all the positive qualities that every religion teaches. So in order to what we call that to live a more peaceful and more harmonious multiracial society, there are roles played by different entities. Just now the government is according to the Buddhist teaching, or these 10 duties. While in some of my interfaith dialogue that I presented, I have some recommendation for the harmonious and unity. Maybe from individual perspective, the first thing is understand your own religion and practice it. Don't just understand and don't practice it, because if you only understand, you just have the eyes, but you cannot walk to the goals. So you must be able to see and able to do it, able to walk. And secondly, other than understanding your own religion, you must also understand other people's religion. Doesn't mean that you might become a devotee of other religions, but to understand why, the reasoning. I think one of the what we call it Maqasid means other than the purpose, also it connotes to the the reasoning behind why the ruling, why such thing applies, why such thing have to be done. So the same thing, we must also understand why people are practicing this. By understanding, then only we can respect others. Then only we can accept others. I went to the ASEAN Youth Interfaith Camp recently with one of my friends here with Najra, and they're talking about tolerance. But I mentioned that in Malaysia, apart from tolerance, we have to go further. We have to go beyond tolerance, which is acceptance. How to promote acceptance and how to make acceptance possible is to understand others and understand yourself. Then only you will respect, because not only ourselves, sometimes we ourselves also not so familiar with our own religious practice, because we always lacking of the ability to ask why we must practice that. So because we do not know why, so we always thinking that we are the best and we criticize others. And the third thing is to focus on the similarity and respect the differences. We see now our society now is getting more polarized, that people of same group, same ethnicity, same religion, or even from the same states, same degree with the same dialects, have tendency to together, to stay together instead of they don't want to interact with other groups. I think this is a very dangerous situation that we must overcome. So how to overcome this is, in fact, I grew up in a Chinese majority community, but how to overcome this is broaden your circle, expand your circle of interaction. You have opportunity to meet people at other places. It doesn't confine to your own community. So try to interact, try to get know to others, okay, regardless their ethnicity, their religion, and also culture. Because sometimes when we meet with people of other races, other religion, in fact, we learn a lot. So the eagerness, or what we call it, the desire to learn, to improve, okay, is another motivation for us, okay, to get to know others and to respect others. Okay, the fifth thing is, in terms of speeches and the action, we must always control or always be mindful of what we are speaking, so that it doesn't hurt the sensitivities of others. And if we face all these radical people or extreme people, and we cannot change them or we cannot persuade them, so it's better for us to avoid or to get rid of them, so that we don't get influenced, and at the same time, okay, we discourage them from doing such a, what we call that, extremism or radical action. And also from another perspective, okay, how to claim in the multiracial organized community is from the government or the NGOs. I think it is important that the first thing is to have more dialogues or forums on interfaiths. And such as I'm also personally involved in FGIS. Maybe later participant can share more. So other than forums, okay, practical works also have to be done, such as like we have some community work, such as to visit places of worships, charity works, and all these works we can involve people from different religion, okay, not only confined with to one religious group. Like Brother Raimi also, okay, with MBM, Young Buddhists also, we have a lot of collaboration with ABIM in a lot of these community works as well as interfaith works. And the other thing, the last thing is to learn, best practices, okay, from each other, because yes, theologically, maybe sometimes there are some constraints, okay, for us to learn, to delve into in depth, okay, amongst each other. However, there are things such as best practices, such as, okay, collaboration in program. We learn about management of places of worship. Maybe sometimes the management of mosques, okay, they have very good practices that we can learn from. And how they mobilize people, how they mobilize volunteers, all this we can learn from each other. We can acquire the strength from others, so that together we grow. And such as and also like leadership or community engagement, like the floods, okay, the disasters management, disaster relief. Most of the time under the Malaysian Youth Council, we move together regardless of ethnicity and also religion. So this is one example, through social works, through charitable works, that we can together create a platform for each other to interact amongst each other. So I think since due to time's constraint, okay, I have to stop here. And I need to okay, finally, I think, okay, so my final words is, okay, to understand each other and to have more common grounds, okay, to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tywing. Just now I mentioned FGIS. The other platform that is also equally important is the Malaysian Youth Council, where you have the young groups from different religions. You have ABIM and PKPIM from the Muslim group. You have the Buddhist Fellowship. You have the HYO, the Hindu Youth Organization. You have YMCA is not very active. Yeah, the Sikh is already there now.
We have Methodist Fellowship.
Yeah, Methodist Fellowship, but the YMCA is no longer.
Just like about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think we have to. I think people in MBM should start looking at your Christian young brothers and sisters and bring them back to the platform. Yeah, thank you. KJ John, but I must only have 10 minutes. Yeah.
Not fair. You got 50 now. Thank you. It's a real privilege to be here, to be reconnected with Dato Saifuddin and good friends like Yusmadi. The country is at a crossroads. So I think the topic is very relevant, absolutely relevant. Let me give you a little bit of my background. In 1980, I traveled to Cairo and to meet up with a friend because I wanted to understand how the church exists within a largely Muslim country. That was the purpose of my visit. Okay. And the most interesting, fascinating thing I learned was when I went everywhere in the church, they greeted one another, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. So I came back
You want to do the same?
to Malaysia, and I was appointed as Pendaftar Intan. So when somebody called me and said, Assalamu alaikum, I say jawab je lah. And then I began to hear two schools of thought. Even in Intan then, some say, hey KJ, you can't do that. You're not Muslim. I said, I'm submitted to God. So there started my dialogue to understand what is really happening. My heritage is St. Thomas Christian. What is that? St. Thomas Christians are the followers of St. Thomas. He is the Thomas who was the first, I call him the first empiricist. He told Jesus, I must see your wounds, I must put my finger in the wound. Then I believe you died, but rose again. Okay? So that's my heritage, St. Thomas Church. If you go to Jalan Ipoh, you can visit. It's still a very old-style church. Okay? That's my heritage. But more importantly, more recently, since 1992, I started in 1987, I'm a student of Sayyid Hussein Nas. Okay? Sayyid Hussein Nas was on my doctoral committee. Why did I have to invite him to sit on my doctoral committee? Because my professors, most of them white, man and woman, they said, John, how are you going to define your thesis? I said, dignity, I don't need to define. It's already in the Bible, just export from Bible. Huh? They say, hey, wait, you can't do that. This is a school of
government.
Secular. We don't mix sacred and secular. So there started my new journey of finding the space in the secular within the sacred. So before long I landed in Dr. Sayyid Hussein Nas as a student because I needed his argument of the sacred to subsume the secular. Okay, he wrote the book Knowledge and the Sacred, Science and Religion now basically. So there the journey started. Okay, I want to just make 3 points and then hopefully I won't exceed my time. The first point is, I've been a public servant for 32 years. So I'm interested in public service. And what is public service? Public service serves the public square. Now where is the public square? The public square is the common space we all share, wherever we are. For example, in this room, there is very little private space, except in your own mind. The only private space here is what's in your mind, or in your heart. The inner thoughts, which we don't know. Okay, so public space, the first point. And from us in Malaysia, public space has been very well defined through the Constitution. Very well defined. I think we have a brilliant Constitution. The only thing is we need to study and become good students. Most of us are bad students.
Including most MPs.
Yeah. Because the late Prof. Ahmad Ibrahim was my professor of constitutional law. Okay, and he took time to explain why the word official religion was not used. He took so much time to explain. So once I met YB Lim Kit Siang and he said official, I said don't use the word official, it's not there in the constitution. It's the religion of the federation. Islam is the religion of the federation. Which made sure there is space for everybody else. Which is what our professor from Canada is telling us, because that's really what it's all about. So that is the second one I want to make. Second point I want to make is we must understand history. If we forget our history, I gave you my history, it goes back to 52 AD. So I joke with people, I have Christianity in my blood, Same like McDonald's had ketchup in their blood, Meaning it's so intertwined into a way of life that you can't just pull it out and extract it. Same. And when I explained that, Dr. Nas said, wow, you're from that great Eastern church. He knew it immediately. So if we don't understand history, we'll be victims of rewriting history. I say victims, because by rewriting history, we'll destroy your own past. Okay, we just, about 2 weeks ago, my family celebrated the memory of our parents. Both have passed on. My dad went on to be 96 years old, one of the founder members of Kedah MIC, and did business with Tun Mahathir for 12 years. Good friend of Tun Mahathir, okay? We are from Sungai Petani, Kedah. But if you don't understand history, we'll get lost. So that one I think is important. And I want to locate this dialogue today in the history of Rukun Nagara. In the Rukun Nagara, we have already captured all of this. Only problem today is most, I will say it very critically but lovingly, most Muslims forget their own history. Or they don't understand whether they are Malay first or Muslim first. That's the problem. Okay, if you say I am a Malay Muslim, then Malay culture precedes in your expression of Islam. If you say I'm a Muslim Malaysian, okay, then you can dress like an Arab. I have no problem, because your Muslim culture, which you somehow connect to Arabia, is located in your dressing and format. So I think that's an inner struggle, and Hannah maybe put the whole thing in good framework by defining it that you have to resolve this issue inside before you become outside. Yeah. So how do you put it all together? And with this, I hope to take my last few minutes. In my doctoral thesis on dignity in the workplace, where I, Dr. Said Hussein Nas of my Chegu, apart from two others, to be fair, there are two other professors. One was a professor of public administration, wrote a whole book on public administration. And the other was just a wonderful human being who was my chairman. He is a professor on leadership and management. One has passed on, the other is still alive. Dr. Nas is still alive, and I hope to go and see him during the Christmas holidays, okay, in Washington, D.C. When you put this whole thing together, I will frame it like this. There are places and spaces. Places and spaces, one dimension. On the other dimension, there are faces. F-A, or you want to spell it P-H also boleh, because we go through a maturity phase.
PH is Pakatan Harapan.
I didn't think of it. It's sharp, very sharp. Okay, when you combine this as a 2x2 matrix, what do you get? You get a private, in both of these places and spaces, there is private and there is public. In faces, muka, kita or maruah kita ada private and public also. So my private maruah may be insulted if somebody wrongly, like my friend Uthaya, whom I haven't met yet, I must shake your hand to meet you. If he say, "Oh, you melalatan," I'll get hurt. Hey, no, you. No, I'm just giving an example. Okay? Because his second name tells me he's Malayali also, okay? If he calls me a Malalatan, among Tamils and Muslims and other Indians, it is not so positive way. He say, I'm a Malayali, okay? So that, we can't help it. That's embedded in our private space definitions. Embedded. In my identity definition, it's embedded. But that will be what I think is the citizen space in public square. We must make space for all citizens in public square. That is the public space. But there will be private space. I have private community space. When we had our memorial for our parents, only friends of the family were invited. And out of 5 of us siblings, I'm the only one who had Malay friends coming for the functions. Because yang lain tak berapa kenal dengan, I went to military college, Royal Military College. So semua, my classmate lebih pada 50 tahun kita dah. Like brothers, okay. So, the other dimension is, if you take face and public space, I said citizen space on one side, community space is the other, community space. So for instance, in identity politics today, there is a need to understand what is our base value. I argue that the base value is human conscience. And Prof. Auda just confirmed that. At the end of the day, we are all human brothers, human beings. And you cannot run away from that. Okay? That is the innermost space. But outer spaces can vary. Above my human conscience space is my space of ethnic identity. So I will say I'm Malayali from Kerala, where Tun Mahathir's grandfather is from. Grandfather, okay? Or I will say I'm a Christian. And when I say that in US, they say, oh, how come you have a Western religion? Excuse me? Dr. Nas defines the East as East of Istanbul. So it's the Eastern religion, okay? Above that, I may have a Malaysian passport. If I go overseas, people ask me, are you Indian or Malaysian? I have to say I'm Malaysian. Bukan Indian. Indian is a nationality. It's not even a race. Subcontinent may be the big group, but Indian is not a race. In fact, you go to India, you will never find Indian. You will find Tamils, Malayalis, so on and so forth. So it's important that we understand all this as a layered truth. But as a public servant, I'm very much offended today because everywhere theft is happening. Really, theft. 2 days ago, we were having our 81st birthday party for Tan Sri Ilyas Omar. He told me, he said, KJ, get me all my people from Intan. My people, serve under him, So we got all those from 72, sampai 78, middle of 78. We had a wonderful birthday party for Tan Sri Ilyas. But then bila dia sebut utusan, he said, I'm concerned that there are moves to steal Intan. Serious? There are some moves to steal Intan. There are people who want to take over Intan for utusan, their own priorities. So, it's important we understand all this because otherwise our public spaces will be abused, and when the public space is abused, we are abusing our own faces because we forget our identity as human beings, given the major responsibility to be steward, Khalifa, if I may use that okay, stewards of the time and space we have on earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. By the way, Syed Hussein Nas led a team of scholars and wrote, they published a couple of years back. Apa nama the study of Quranic.
The translation.
Yeah, the translation and commentaries, studies of the Quran.
Study Quran.
Studies of the study Quran. Yeah. I mean, you can find it in some of the major bookshops. Very, very well written.
His book, The Heart of Islam, was translated into Malay in Indonesia.
Yeah. Okay. Last but not least, we always blame the media. Though, politicians have a love-hate relation with the media. Always invite the media for press conferences and send our press release. The moment we get into trouble, we say we were misquoted by the media. And when there are problems everywhere, we say, this is the media's problem. Anyway, Dato' Jalil, that's just to introduce how important you are. I mean, I'm just joking. He's my older brother. I mean, he advised my column, so I better be careful. Sila, Dato'.
Ya, saya sejuk sebenarnya. Itu sejuk. You see, when I was in varsity, I took comparative religion as one of my option paper. That make me more understand of the various religion that yang kita bersama-sama sekarang ya. And then one day I went to satu church di Damansara, Calvary Church. I do not know dia ada lagi ke dah. You see, I follow my girlfriend. The fact that akhirnya saya tak kahwin dengan dia itu is different. But what I'm trying to tell you is that bila ada orang nampak saya dengan this Chinese girl pergi ke church, my friend was so surprised. Macam mana hang boleh masuk gereja? I cakap campur-campur lah tu ya. Kalau I will explain to Professor Auda if you don't understand, because I'm familiar talking in my bahasa. So dia kata, why must you go to church? I thought, what is wrong going to church? Because saya pun pergi mosque, saya pernah masuk kuil. Tidak ada masalah to me. But then the perception of my Malay Muslim colleague is that if you go to church, you will become Christian. What more, waktu saya kecil-kecil dulu, saya tak boleh masuk sekolah Inggeris sebab dia kata sekolah Inggeris ni dia akan bagi hang ayak. Minum ayak ni holy water, they call holy water. You become Christian. So I was wondering, is that easy to become Christian or to become Muslim? Just drink water. Okay, anyway, I'm not here to preach you, because I'm not the preacher. You see, in Selangor, even you're a preacher, you need to have the license to talk. Otherwise, they will come and tangkap me. I will share my experience as a media practitioner in facing many religious issues in this country. I do agree with John. Kita ni dekat crossroad when come to religion. You see, being a journalist, I'm supposed to be fair to all religion. But then in Malaysia, there are things that you can write, there are things you can't. And you must understand that in Malaysia, the newspaper is being, I cannot say control, then they will control me. We are governed by so many laws and acta in doing our daily routine. But the fact that, like John say, actually Islam is not the official religion of Islam, as stated in the Constitution, is agama persekutuan. And you must also remember that other religion boleh dipraktiskan, tak ada masalah. But then in doing reporting in my newspaper is Sinar Harian. I know Putrajaya is not very happy with that paper. But never mind. As long as Pakatan Harapan suka, it's okay. And in my newspaper, there are columnists from various parties. Brother Saifuddin is one of them, and then Nur Iza. And we have daripada PM office, when we are, I would say Sinaharian is a neutral newspaper. But being neutral is also susah juga. When you publish our friend in front page, the Putrajaya will call me, why you put him in the front page? On the contrary, if I put Putrajaya in front page, dia punya grup kata apa, hang pakai itu. So I would rather be in Utusan. I started my career in Utusan Melayu a long time ago. I would rather be in Utusan. You know, you are serving for who? But in Sinaharian, trying to be neutral, people will hantam you from both party will hantam you lah. But then after 10 years now, people more understand that we are really neutral. The fact that sana boleh hentam saya, sini pun boleh hentam saya, is because we are neutral. And with that, this beside the pen, a little bit campaign for my paper. That's why. Because you call me, I make it. So religion is among the things that the Kementerian Dalam Negeri will be monitoring very closely as a media man. You cannot simply say, and it is also clearly stated, you cannot say bad thing about other religion, but you can say good thing about your religion, which is also good. I mean, we cannot blame other religion as not good or our religion is the best, man. But we must. But I always believe. When I went to Calvary Church, saya tengok setengah orang dia pakai skirt pergi attend sermon. When in Islam, you are not supposed to expose your aurat. So saya dapat satu experience baru. Tetapi ini girlfriend saya ini, walaupun dia pakai skirt, dia bagus. So you cannot say Christian is not good just because they expose dia punya lengan, kan? So the value, the good value is, I believe good value semua ada dalam religion pun. But then the problem we ask now is that tidak kira Islam ataupun Kristian atau any other religion, whether we really practice apa yang diajar dalam agama itu. Kalau kita ambil Islam, itu Islam for example, whether we can, we know the holy book of Al-Quran, but do we really understand what is in the Quran, what Quran asks us to do? And in Sinar Harian, we try to explain the importance of Al-Quran, not only for Muslim, for the rest of the rakyat, which is why we have what we call it a campaign, or rather movement to understand Al-Quran. We have Malaysian Quran Hour, we have World Quran Hour, but the purpose of this Quran Hour is actually my personal Quran Hour. That is the ultimate aim of the movement, because we believe if we read Al-Quran, we understand the meaning of all those verses. That is good. But then if we read Quran, we understand the meaning, and what is more important is we practice the meaning of Al-Quran. We do this campaign for 4 years now. We created, we call Rumah Ngaji, brother. Rumah Ngaji means Rumah Ngaji is to encourage every Muslim to read Al-Quran every day. every minute. Now we have, after 3 years, 4 years, we have more than 2,000 rumah ngaji all over the country, including Sabah and Sarawak. So we try to teach people not only reading Al-Quran, but what more important is understanding the meaning of all those verses. We in Malaysia, we have so many sekolah pondok, sekolah tahfiz Quran, banyak pun. But then kadang-kadang I wonder whether these people kecil-kecil ni dia hafal Al-Quran, which is good. Al-Quran, as we know, even you read at the holy book, ada pahala. You dengar orang baca pun ada pahala. Tapi kadang-kadang saya wonder, budak-budak kita dia belajar, dia hafal Al-Quran, alhamdulillah bagus. But then whether they really understand the meaning apa yang dia baca. Because kadang-kadang saya tengok ada berlaku kecurian di sekolah-sekolah agama ini, ada berlaku dadah, tumbuk orang, bunuh orang, bakar sekolah. What is this? Probably they read, but they do not really understand the meaning. Even if they understand, probably they don't practice it. So Sinar Harian do the campaign to make people reading Al-Quran. Actually, we also publish Al-Quran. We have, now we print it here. The only commercial printing that print Al-Quran. Even PMO also recognize that. We publish Al-Quran because we want people to read Al-Quran and understand the meaning and practice the meaning of all those syair or whatever from langit. We believe kalau semua orang baca Al-Quran, faham Al-Quran and understand and practice the thing, kita tak perlu ada pun SPRM, polis, tak perlu ada. Because dalam Al-Quran it's clearly stated, dalam Al-Quran ni semua ada. Cara nak mengorat ada, cara nak. Padahal of course you have to follow the rule of the. I'm not campaigning for apa ya. In fact kita punya Al-Quran tu, kalau orang bukan Islam pergi tempat kita bagi. Wah, orang marah, macam mana bagi Al-Quran pada orang kafir? But we have argue, kalau kita tak bagi Quran pada orang kafir, macam mana orang kafir nak faham? Kita bagi Quran tu not because we want them to embrace Muslim, no. We want them to really understand what is in the Quran. Sebab sekarang ini the non-Muslim sudah lihat Muslim from a negative side. Because that yang paling rasuah pun Muslim juga. Rogol orang Muslim, bunuh orang pun orang Muslim banyak. What more sekarang ni, kalau bunuh, kalau tipu mesti Muslim satu, Datuk satu. Ya, Melayu, Muslim, Datuk. Kadang-kadang kita pun bahasa tak apa sedap juga pakai Datuk ni. Orang tengok Jalil semacam Datuk pula lu girlfriend dia Cina. So kita bagi Quran itu pada kawan-kawan saya bukan Islam, saya akan bagi. And the Quran tebal. If you want bahasa Melayu translation, we have. If you want English translation, we have. Now we are doing Mandarin translation. But then publishing and distributing Al-Quran, printing Al-Quran is not an easy job. In the first place, the original text must be approved by the bahagian penerbitan Al-Quran Kementerian Dalam Negeri, endorsed by Jakim. Kalau you know Al-Quran, you salah sikit aja kena tanggung dosa. Sebab then kita buat, sekarang kita tengah terjemah dalam bahasa Mandarin, dan I have few friends Chinese yang dia sudah jadi Muslim dan dia jadi a better Muslim as compared to me. You talk about Firdaus Wong, dia buat jalanan punya dakwah, dia cerita Al-Quran kan. can you imagine kalau semua orang Islam read Al-Quran, understand Al-Quran, practice Al-Quran? Saya ingat 50% of the problem that the country is facing now habis, sudah hilang. And kalau we share what is in the Quran tu, John dia faham lah Quran pasal dia punya profesor semua orang kuat, Islamic scholar. Tapi if I can share Quran tu sikit-sikit dengan my jiran, now I ajar jiran saya, sebelah tu Mr. Chi, sebelah lagi ni Mr. Tan, dia selalu tengok saya bulan puasa pakai apa tu, kepiah, pergi ke surau. Bila balik saya bawa kuih bagi dekat dia, pasal surau lebih kuih. Anak Yeoh pun selalu belanja surau saya ni, dan dia interesting, seorang tu dia interesting betul-betul, Francis. So explain to him ni. Tapi kita janganlah explain yang susah-susah dulu, kita cerita yang bagus. What is Al-Quran teach us to do? Lama-lama dia tidak masuk Islam, tapi dia become a good jiran, at least dengan saya. Dia tahu dia apa, dan dia menghormati saya, dia respect me. Dia mula-mula dia pelihara anjing, bila dia tak pelihara anjing lagi. Anjing dia nama Mushu. Where's your Mushu? I sent to my daughter punya apalah. Dia tak pelihara. He respect me. Similarly, I respect him too. That, you see, religion kalau kita practice, tidak kira apa religion, we can be a good manusia yang lebih baik, a better Muslim, a better person. Tapi kalau you kata ini tak boleh lah lagu ni pasal apa, ini Dobi ini hanya boleh untuk orang Islam, dia jadikan isu. Ini pun jahat surat khabar juga ni, because the newspaper create an issue, macam lah the laundry tu is one big issue. Surat khabar jugalah, because we want to sell the newspaper. But then in Sinar area, yeah, we do publish that kind of story, but we don't exploit the story. We publish as it is, and then in fact I question. Tapi ni kalau cakap lagi, tak orang tangkap saya kata maka raja pula. What is the right of the Sultan to ask the people to stop business? Barat dia boleh buat bisnes lagi, bisnes itu tidak menyalahi hukum Allah dan tidak menyalahi hukum undang-undang negara. Dia kata dia nak buat untuk orang Islam, satu dunia, satu Melayu heboh kerana itu. Tapi when come the latest issue on the tudung, orang tak berani cakap pula. Sinar Harian buat 3 hari berturut-turut on the front page. Why kita tidak boleh pakai tudung? Who is this Mah? Bukan Rosmah yang ni, Mah. Malaysian Association Hotel. Dia tak ada aru S, Mah ya. So why kita tidak boleh pakai? You see that kind of issue, kalau kita nak develop, dia akan become not only religious issue, ini become racial issue. Kita tak buat macam tu. But we want people to understand and to answer the question why we cannot purdah. Ada kata ini purdah tak boleh. Purdah, one ustaz say dia wajib. Itu obligatory. Semua orang to cover the out. Lah macam when non-Muslim ladies went to government office, ada kenyataan di situ, you tidak boleh pakai skirt singkat, seluar singkat. Oh, dia kata this is constitutional right. But in case of tudung, itu pun constitutional right. So ini yang kita Yang Sina Haram pertama kali soal agama ni kita buat sampai 3 hari berturut-turut. Sampai for what I know, kerajaan sekarang sudah apa, dia kata siapa yang larang tu nak tarik lesen. Tapi ada masa lagi. Okay, satu minit sana. That one I think we have another forum on that. But then to stress that religion, no matter what religion, is actually the satu faktor yang boleh menyatu padukan Malaysia. Dengan syarat pengamal-pengamal agama itu betul-betul dia mengikuti apa yang disuruh oleh agama dia. Kalau Islam, you must follow strictly to what the Quran say. InsyaAllah tidak akan ada apa-apa yang berlaku. Sama juga Kristian, Hindu. Tapi kadang-kadang ni politician ni pun satu juga. It is politician to me. Sorry ya, you bahasa you kata you bukan politician tadi. Kadang-kadang politician create the issue, guna religion, and then jumpa Abah pun pakai cerita itu. Abah pakai ni salah satunya because in news. Dan sekarang ni Abah turun semua sekali kan. Kita nak hot news. Good news never sell, bad news sell. But not all bad news we can publish. You cannot publish simply 1MDB kan. Someone will call you, apa you masuk itu muka depan besar-besar, pakai single column cukup lah. That is also constitutional right. Dan sekarang ni semua globally punya fenomena, the newspaper, print newspaper all jatuh. Termasuk di kumpulan media Karangkraf kita punya sinar harian, of course dia masih tinggi lagi, but then not as tinggi as it used to be. Dulu kita kalah The Star tu. Sekarang kita tinggal separuh, 50% drop. Because now people's reading newspaper through this gadget. And semua pressman dalam Malaysia ni, now even myself, I'm no longer a pressman, rather depressed man. So back to religion, saya ingat kita kena we practice apa juga religion yang kita ada. It doesn't, tak ada masalah. Tetapi kita kena practice ikut yang betul-betul religion kata, bukan kerana politik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm sorry because bahasa saya bercampur-campur ya.
Thank you, Dato' Jalil. You see, there is in Malaysia and in many countries. Just now we were talking about blasphemy. Some countries have blasphemy law, and then Uthaya mentioned about hate spin. Normally we are quite used to hate speech, yeah. But I like this book by this Josh. He's Singaporean teaching in Hong Kong. He wrote a book entitled The Hate Spin. And when you talk about politics, there are political opportunists who actually manufacture hate spin. Hate speech is offense giving. Hate spin is when you give offense, you manufacture victim who receive offense, then the cycle move in a certain way, and this is where, so it's not spontaneous, it's actually manufactured. That is why sometimes you wonder, there was an issue that was there for 3 years, no one talked about it, suddenly one politician bring it up and the whole country gets into trouble. And this is what hate spin is all about. Yeah. So anyway, we have this problem, we have to face it, we have to address it, but now is a time for members of our congregation, if I may, to present your intervention. We have slightly less than half an hour, or less than half an hour, not slightly. Yeah, okay. You want to respond first? Okay, I think to be fair to Dr. Jasser, he has been here for a couple of days, and the problem with Malaysians is that whenever you have this foreign pawang, dukun dari luar, I mean, whenever you have a foreign speaker, you make him overwork and they have been not very fair to him. So what we will do now is I will allow Jasser to respond, and then he may want to take leave, and then but we will continue after that for a couple more minutes before we adjourn for lunch. Would that be all right? Okay. So please, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And no, I don't mind being overworked in Malaysia. I enjoy every invite. Actually, I'm really happy to hear all of these 6 interventions. And they all confirmed what I really believe, that being a more religious person, whether Muslim or Christian or wherever you are coming from, then you will be a better citizen. And then we will have more common ground. And I especially cherish Datuk Abdul Jalil's comment on reading the Quran, because Muslims have a problem of leaving the Quran to read for the scholars only. But the Quran is not only for scholars. The Quran is actually for everybody to read. And for Muslims and non-Muslims, the Quran is saying, oh people, in the 2nd or 3rd page, read and reflect. And so it's supposed to be an open book. And if it is read and by everybody, then the interpretations will become more to the center. But because it is read only by a few, the few control the interpretations, and sometimes the interpretations go to the extreme and nobody knows that this is not a right interpretation. And what the Quran stresses is really what Islam stresses, and what the Quran doesn't really address at all. You will find that therefore the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, will not address at all, and it's not an issue, or maybe it's a small issue. The Quran addresses the issue of the common word. Oh, you people of the book, let's come to a common word. Kalimatin sawa. This is very similar to what my brother talked about in Muwafaqat. It's something we wafiq, to agree on, an agreed ground. And the common word is not only an Islamic concept. You mentioned that article by the name In Search of the Common Word. In Canada, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has a book with the same title, In Search for the Common Word. A common ground. A common ground. In fact, it is his own biography. And if you read, you'll find why he became a leader, and a good leader, really, with whatever exception for political needs to, to do wrong things. Well, alhamdulillah, I'm not a politician, alhamdulillah. But you find that because he's seeking a common ground, he was able to rebuild his party and to gain a very big majority in a country that did not give a majority to that party. But this takes people to be aware, and not for people to be pushed to the extreme by bad politics. Really, you need to remedy bad politics when it starts to push people to extremes. I mentioned the stories of the 70s and 80s of the Arab world, when the Arab governments were trying to push people to extremes. You watch TV in Arab countries and you find them calling you for jihad in Afghanistan and so on. And that is how extremism is now a fact. They like it, they are benefiting from it, but they created it. So, but if people read the Quran and read their holy scriptures, and in general, it will protect them, because any scripture is really about the higher values. I believe in the Quran, but I read the Bible, I read the Vedas, and I know that there is a lot of truth there in terms of the higher values. This is the common ground. And I want to add as well that being moderate or taking a central wasati path does not mean to be mediocre. For Muslims does not mean to be a weak Muslim. In fact, it means to be a strong Muslim. Some people view mediocre as half practicing Islam. No, it is practicing Islam fully. But if you understand Islam properly, if you understand what it means to be Muslim, and go beyond the shapes and all of these things. I mean, I'm asked oftentimes about the amama and whether a Muslim has to wear amama, or Sheikh, when I give a khutbah, why don't you wear amama? I said the amama is Arab clothes. I'm originally from Mecca in Hijaz. We wear amamas, but Muslims and non-Muslims wear amama. The Prophet ﷺ wore it, and so did Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl too, What did they wear? They didn't wear jeans or cowboy hats. They wore amamas. But because that's what Arab wear, but, becoming more of an international citizen, I don't wear something over my head. It's not part of my aura as Muslim, as a Muslim man anyway. So we need to differentiate between cultures and Islam. Doesn't mean that cultures are bad, including the Arab culture. But we need to really differentiate between Islam and the Arab culture. When we send our kids from different parts of the world to learn in the Arab world, what is happening these days is highly political. So they might go and study, I don't know, in Egypt or, I don't know, Jordan and all of these places. But we really need to do some rehab for them because they get corrupted. They get corrupted with the politics. And they come back and spread mischief. In America, we see it, in Canada and Europe. They go and learn in the Middle East, and then they come and they divide the communities, and they make all sorts of problems because they learned in the Middle East. They think, I think we need to stop that trend of sending people to the Arab world, which is really at a low historical point these days, to learn about Islam. And I think we need to support Islamic education proper in Malaysia. I've met people here who are really great scholars of Islam, and they understand Islam as much as any scholar anywhere. So to avoid sending our kids there to become Arabized, and then they come back and they don't differentiate between the Arab culture that they learned from and Islam. So they come here and they fight fights that do not exist here. It might exist there, over certain political divides as well. I said originally from Arabia, therefore the divide between Najd and Hijaz is not a divide that so many people know about, but it's a divide that really defines many, many things in Islam these days. Between the Najdi kind of approach and the Hijazi approach, it's a different lecture. But basically, we need to go back to the origin of religions, the values, the common ground. The Prophet ﷺ made this Hilf al-Fudul, the alliance of the virtuous. There were everybody, idol worshippers, Muslims. He was a believer at that time. Like he was a believer all the time, even before Islam. He was a believer, and then eventually the same party continued. So I think you need something like that, the alliance of the virtuous. The alliances over higher ground of virtue and akhlaq and adab, and ethics, and then we can practice the way we like. Does this go against the theory of the Islamic State? Yes, it does. But this is not an Islamic state. This is Malaysia. This is, yes, it has Muslims, but it's not a khilafah here. The khilafah ended after 40 years after the Prophet. That's my view. And what came after was empires that were as good as a nation state. In fact, the nation state could be much nicer if it gives people, the rights. To comment as well very quickly over my brother's comments about the need for democracy and rule of law. Yes, I agree, but we need to be critical of democracy and rule of law, because rule of law could be misused and democracy could be misused. Democracy produced what we see in America, and that means that democracy has a problem if it's going to produce that guy who is ruling America today. It means that democracy has a flaw. There must be something wrong. This can't be the best American to rule America. That is ridiculous. So how we should deal with democracy is with ethics, with an education, so that people do not bring the worst up to power, and that's what democracy could do as well. And rule of law as well. What's happening in Egypt and Arabia and these places, this is rule of law too. They do all of this by the law, and these are courts, and they're killing hundreds of people with capital punishment for crimes, and it's all nonsense because they corrupted the law and they corrupted the courts. So the rule of law has to be within a framework of good laws, fair laws, and good court systems, and no corruption. Otherwise the law becomes a weapon, the law becomes a sword, friend of the sword. Anyway, may Allah protect all of us from the friends of the swords. And thank you very much again for inviting me. I'm really regretting to have to leave because I'm inviting to a wedding party as well. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be speaking there, but I'm hoping not, but at least to greet the bride and bridegroom. And thank you very much for inviting me, and appreciate all of it. Thank you. All right.
Okay, I want to check with the Secretariat. This is the most important thing in Malaysia. What time is lunch ready? Oh, okay. I don't think we want to spend too much time, but I want to do, if I can propose two things. Number one, I will invite people who wants to make intervention, short and precise intervention. That's number one. Number two is that, remember at the outset I talked about connecting the dots. There are people already working with certain things and some are already here. And I've already inform you there are two projects that IDE is working on. One is on fiqh at-ta'ayush as-silmi, fiqh of peaceful coexistence, and the other one is trying to come up with a new political thoughts. Prof, you may be interested in the second project. Yeah, you have written about this multiracial and moderate political thinking or political ideas. So in actual fact, we need people to start working and contributing, and we in Institut Darul Ehsan will soon come up with some kind of a framework. What we plan to do is later on is to email the framework to people who have attended today's roundtable and the two roundtable that we have organized in the past, because we know John has written, Uthaya has written, Yusmadi has written, of course Jalil has been writing all the while, and you have bumped into other people writing. These are all scattered, you know, and we need to bring it to some place where we either deposit it or we get people to people like Rozan is good at collecting, and then we need to document this thing, because this Ustaz Ghani has written since I was a student of his in University Malaya in the early 80s about Islam and other religions, you know. So people has been doing all kinds of good jobs, but many of these things are scattered all over the places, and we need to bring people together. I give you one practical example. Sorry, I'm not supposed to speak this long, but since I'm on this subject, remember the NUCC, the National Unity Consultative Council? Yeah, it's not a bad thing. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. Maybe not everyone was represented, but it's not a bad thing. It came up with a good report. You know, Professor Shamsul and Denison and Anis work a lot, but it's dead. You know. We can pick it up and do something about it. They may be state government of Selangor or Penang or some other state or some other people may want to carry up. Yeah, we can take it back. Now Mujahid Yusoff Rawa has sent a letter to the Secretary of Dewan Rakyat for a private bill on the Akta Harmony, the National Harmony Act. It's not the most sexiest law in the world, but it is about non-discrimination. And it is about either you want to call it equality law or anti-discrimination law. It's an important piece of legislation that we need. It's better than the Sedition Act, obviously. I mean, so there are practical things that we are, some people are doing, and we need to have more inputs into this. So what I intend to do is later on, as I said, once we are more concrete in the framework, we will email this and then we will be getting people to respond. So you may hear one or two more roundtable from us, but after that you will not hear so much because we are hoping to actually do actual work among the rakyat. So politics is politics. Election can come, election can go, but we are here to stay. Okay. Having said that, may I invite if there are some interventions, some quick interventions. Yes, Prof. Sila.
Yes, Professor from UCSI University.
Another controversial figure.
Yes,
all come together here today in this room. Yeah?
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Coming from the university, I've always said to my colleagues and everything, I said, hey, if the university doesn't change, that's it for the country, okay? There are only three agents of social change: the political leadership, the civil society, and the university. But of course, journalists always think, well, because he's from the university, he thinks everything's university. But the point here is that, I mean, I come from the university and I listen to the academics, the way that they just concentrate on certain things and they forget about the society. And you know, on the 25th of November, not to campaign, but Tan Sri Omar actually has come up with what he calls transformational university, of which he has given the idea that the university must contribute to civil, the way that we have civil civility, he says. That even though you are from engineering, but you must also have the idea of what civility is, what good citizenry is. And this is, I think, a milestone, and I hope to turn that into something. And eventually, he says, we have to have this, not this QS ranking, but transformational ranking, meaning that universities will compete about how much they contribute to nation building. That I've been talking all this while and losing all friends from public university, you know. Okay, but I just want to stand up and say about this idea that has been floating, the idea of what our friend said. Look, if you read the Quran, then it's understandable. Well, it's not as simplified as that. I would just like to put on an academic statement for us to have a guide on. Now, if we hear Saifuddin here talk about something, and Dr. Auda talk about something, and when we leave this room, and then when we say, well, I heard Saifuddin said this, and he meant this, you must understand, this is an interpretation. Yep. Okay? Anytime, anything in academia, when you listen to some sort of source, it's always an interpretation. So, somewhere along the line, some people elected themselves to be the only interpretation, the only voice of God. Okay? I don't care whether you have a PhD in religion, Islam and all that. I don't care how big your turban is. Okay? But I know when you say God says this, God says that, it's an interpretation. And so when you read something like the Quran, obviously you need some other interpretation. And this is the point. We have to treat all source as an interpretation. And even in religion, Christianity, Islam and all this, I've come to the idea that religion is no longer a spiritual path. It's a racial, political, cultural identity. So what we are fighting about, the tudung and all that, it's not about faith, it's about an identity. And this is the problem, where people will say, well, you know, he's not doing the right religion. Actually, it's not the right interpretation. So the point here I want to make is that we must understand whatever religion we are, is always an interpretation that became an institution, like the church institution, the Islamic institution, and so forth. And I don't understand how this is so difficult a message to give when we have many millions of people have gone through universities. And that's what the unfortunate part when I say, what universities are teaching what I call artificial intelligence. Okay, because they cannot think critically. They just look at the PowerPoint and answer the question this way, and they get their degrees. And this is called artificial intelligence, another problem in university education. So I just want to make that point about anything where we read holy books or Saifuddin's book, and you start saying things, or you listen to somebody say some things, it's an interpretation. And if we can put that into the university then I think some things will change.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Somebody asked me yesterday, Din, you are organizing a discussion tomorrow on the role of religion, but none of the panelists are actually religious leaders. I say, we don't have any monopoly about religion. That's why, I mean, we are all here today based on whatever, I mean, different background. Any other intervention? Quick one. Yes, saudara, ku, abangku.
Cool now.
Okay, he is a trainer, so he stands.
Yeah. A trainer need to stand. Okay, three short ideas. One is, I'm Yusoff from Auda, Selangor. I think we need to compliment the Star for almost daily issuing articles on the issues of national unity. And I'm a fan of Star. Number two, this is just out of the blues. When the organizer mentioned the word reclaiming the center, the role of religion in a multiracial society, why not we change it to this way? The role of religion in society, without mentioning the multicultural, because it's quite difficult to find in this world today nations without multiracial, multi-religious. All are plural, or in Malay we call it Jama'. In fact, Jama' is Arabic, but we have Malayanized the word Jama'. Lastly, number three is, I think along the way there is a point where I think all of us could come up with shared values that we could agree upon among Malaysians. Let's say 7 or 9 shared values among us that we will treasure and make road shows on that in order for us to commit to that common denominators of common shared values. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I can quickly respond to Saudara Nick. You see, the shared values framework has been there. But we need to continue doing it also, because not everybody is on board, so we have to continue. But there is another stage that we have to go when we start translating it into real thing. There you will find it not easy. Remember the debate about the Harmony Act? We were accused of being all kinds of things except right. Yeah. And when you look at the people commenting, they are from religious background, they are from legal backgrounds, but when, as they say in English, the devil is in the details. The shared values, I agree with you, Brother Nick. I think Uthaya was also talking about the same thing. We need to continue doing that. But some of us, maybe people like John, and Mujahid and Chiwi and people like Professor, another group may have to start going deep into the actual public space, and how do we share religion or the virtues into actual things. Yeah. Any other intervention?
Yeah. Assalamualaikum.
Yes. Salam.
Okay. Assalamualaikum. Okay. My name Mona Lisa from Shah Alam. Okay. Members from Auda also, and also volunteer and a part of politician punya kerja. Okay. I just been touching about the meaning of kafir. Okay. For my understood of my learning in knowledge, the kafir is not because of the words of meaning of kafir is not for the other races selain daripada Melayu. Okay. This kafir is actually, the meaning is engkar. It means it's also who are they are Islam, and also they are Islam in religions, but if they are not follow the Qurans and also the Sunnah, it means he or he, the person is kafir. So I hope this meaning of kafir is so sensitive, been touching for other races, because the races pun ada sensitive humanity. So hopefully the words of kafir, please don't use in other people's races, okay, because it's so sensitive. Okay, and also if we know about the meaning of from the Adam, okay, and Hawa, Adam and Hawa, how God Allah create humans from Adam. Essentially we are from the parents of Adam and Hawa. So, and in the Al-Quran Al-Baqarah is also have the meaning of dijadikan manusia, Allah menjadikan manusia itu berbangsa-bangsa dan bersuku-suku untuk saling kenal mengenali dan untuk saling memahami, tetapi Allah akan memilih pada orang yang bertakwa. So it means kita back into the holy of Quran, which the meaning is everything there. So I hope that is the meaning. If we have the principle, okay, from the, it's not a book, but it's a gift, okay, from Muhammad to Muhammad, but to the humanity. So kita akan ada peaceful. So there is no reason that kita nak fight together, because in the respect of human, in the respect of religious, we cannot, we are not having to, we are not to force other people, okay, you mesti masuk agama aku, you know, no. Okay, bisa whatever religions pun. Okay, another thing about Muslim is actually a person who are Muslim, because I've been talking this to Indonesian people, is actually the people who are practice what is in Quran. So who are not practice, they are just maybe their religion is only Islam, but they are not Muslim. So that is two different things. And I've been always go to Brunei now. So the example that I admire in Brunei, how the country is so peaceful. Okay, it's so peaceful, but there is no forcing, and also even the Muslim people, I mean the Islam, and they are also Muslim, they are not forced to wear the hijab. So they can do whatever they want. Besides, they have been controlled with the rules of the country. So it's so peaceful, and the police also tak ada senjata pun. No, so there is no criminal there. Okay, and it's very peaceful. Maybe not to, maybe orang kata tak ada apalah nak enjoy, but actually I enjoy to be there, because you will feel so peaceful there, and harmony with all races and all belief and all religions. So thank you. Sorry that a little bit of teguran here for the meaning of the words. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, okay, can I have FJS?
I think it's already good afternoon to everyone, and thanks Dato Saifuddin for giving me this opportunity. So I would like to share here, okay, what is FGIS actually? FGIS is a friendship group of interfaith services, and how unique it is compared to other groups is that I think Dato Saifuddin mentioned here about the MCC BCHST, which is the main council supposed to be, but it is incomplete. In reality, it is incomplete because no representative from Islam in that. But in FGIS, we have ABIM in FGIS, which is, I feel, it's very unique and very good. And a lot of activities we do. One activity just now Dato also mentioned about we have an orchestra called Interfaith Orchestra, which is the FGIS members are NGOs from various religion. So automatically we have many the members from many religion, and our orchestra is from various group of religion as well. And we always come up with a theatrical shows portraying how Malaysian should be, how unity should be embraced and all that. And very soon we are going to coming up with, I think we are also working on coming up with some movies and all that. A lot of things going on. And one of the another unique activity we does is we have these visiting like a house of worships. We bring in, just now like Brother Uthaya mentioned that they bring small groups. We bring big groups. We go in 5 buses, 10 buses. All right. On the same day, we visit. We will have a breakfast in a mosque, lunch in a temple, tea in a church, maybe. So like that. And we will learn about multi-religion in a day. And we also organize like gotong royong sessions, whereby all of us get together. We go to like one of the activity we done last year in Pahang, whereby we go to one particular kampung. There was one Chinese tokong and also masjid. So we clean up the whole place. The full day like we spend with the villagers. We cook with them, which happened to be a Malay village, and it was very beautiful day we had. So as such, we organize so many programs in FGIS, and I believe like today there are few keywords attracted me. So I would like to bring up here, which is interaction and collaboration, which is the basic or basis of FGIS, whereby we collaborate with all the NGOs, other from various religion, and we interact with each other. Okay, I think like here I see many familiar faces like Tan and brother behind there from Abim, and I think one of the secretariat also from used to be FGIS member, which is Nazda is here. So like I think these need to grow. So these need to grow. Everybody need to. We don't have to have like interfaith groups anymore. It should be interfaith should be everywhere. Then like we will have a real multiracial, multicultural, harmonious Malaysia. And we also talk about we used to talk on like tolerance, religious tolerance, which is like, you know, I have to tolerate. Even though I don't like, I have to tolerate. That is the tolerance. But why we have to go to that? We have to come whereby we talk about acceptance and coexistence. And like I think we are moving towards there, and also unity in diversity. We forget about what the difference we have between the religion, but we embrace what similarity we have, especially the coalition of virtues, which virtues are the basis of any religion. All religions says we have to be good, so we have virtues. If everybody we can like we collide based on virtues, I think we won't have any differences. So that is my thought here, and thanks for the time. Thank you.
Yeah, we have and then di hujung sana.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Jamzuri. I am the communication director for Amanah Selangor. So I'd like to comment a few things. First, on the topic reclaiming the center. Well, I think a lot of us agree that we should reclaim the center. But when we really ask the person, please point out where the center is, then we might have many different centers, and then we have to find out what is the center of these centers. So this is the reality that we are facing. The same thing if you're talking about
you are spot on. You are spot on.
Yeah. And same thing. This is about interpretation, just like Professor Tajuddin said. We have many interpretation of many things, and this is something that we have to resolve from time to time. And secondly is we are talking about the reality of religious or religiosity in Malaysia. Is not really about religion or the practice of religion. We don't have Christian haters or Hindu haters or Buddhist haters, but when comes to a specific issue, there is a sensitivities. So this is the problem of sensitivities, not the problem of religions. So we try to, Islam is good, that practice tolerance and things, but it's not really the problem with Islam. The problem is the sensitivities. We go to the specific issues, then we find out this problem with sensitivity. You talk about LGBT, then many people will start standing up here and there. Take into example the book written by Hanayo. I read that book. It was a very innocent book. Yeah. That because she is the DAP figures, and then a lot of things crop up from that simple innocent book. You see, this is all about sensitivities. So we might need to address more on how we should address sensitivities instead of religion, because we found out there many people who are not religious, they don't even pray regularly. They may commit sins, major sins in fact. But if you are talking about taking out their loudspeaker in the mosque, they will be the first to
even
jump
though
out.
they didn't go to the mosque.
Even they will go to the mosque. So this is about sensitivities. When they fall insulted on certain issues, then they try to find out around religions. So this is the thing that I would like to add for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I really I like your intervention because I remember in the other roundtable that we have about racism. One of the conclusions that we arrived at is that actually it's not about racism, it's economics. But because politics come into it, and politics unfortunately sometimes or most of the time is identity politics, then it becomes a racial issue. But in actual fact it's an economic issue. Yeah. Kampung Medan is a good example. It became a racial issue, but it started with something else. Yeah. Can maybe that is the last. Maybe yours is our young brother there.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to all. My name is Adli Zulfadli. I'm a third year law student from International Islamic University, Malaysia. I'm a bit shaky because it's so cold. Thank you to the organizer. I would like to congratulate for organizing such a good event, and it's a very good input from all the speakers, and especially these classes. It is indeed. I would like to share a very important view from my perspective as an undergraduate student. Being an undergraduate student in Malaysia nowadays, there's a lacuna, especially in access to knowledge. So what we're having right now is that students who are ignorant enough in learning other cultures. In the aspect of the view from my university, in our university, International Islamic University in Malaysia, we were confronted with people from all around the world, international people, students, but of the same faith, and they bring along their own cultures. And what we have things in common is basically the faith system. But what happened now in Malaysia is that there's a big disparity, especially huge amount of tolerance. This all kind of thing happen because of lack of education. There should be a progressive education plan in educating youngsters. This is indeed a very common thing. For example, in discussion in classes, students are not exposed or can't give opinion which actually in opposition with their lecturers' views. This kind of thing actually disregard the faculty of thinking, especially for students who are actually eager to know more. And by exposing this kind of issue, because religious is very sensitive, but by promoting education, a proper guideline of education should be a better plan in solving all this problem. We will not be saying that all this hatred, racist issue happen if we do have education. As YB Hanayu actually explained, we do have to prepare the youngster with a better education system. So this is where the main role of education system in guiding the students, especially myself, for being a better Muslim, a better student, also a better future leader in a society. So I would like to encourage especially all the participants, because the views are very good. Discussions from the floor is indeed worth my time here, my weekends, and all of us are actually encouraging each other to accept and respect the tolerance among other differences. So in university, in my university, I would like to share, we have actually a course where it is compulsory to all students, which we call method of da'wah. So this method of da'wah actually touch all the cultural issues in Malaysia. We discuss on Buddhists, in Hindus and everything. Unfortunately, there's a lacking of practicality. Most of us actually were left to gauge the slides, just to listen and then interpret in accordance with our own way. So we did not get into the clear picture of practicals. But alhamdulillah, one of our society in the university, the Quranic Youth Club, has actually done a very progressive job. They just came back from Singapore, from an interfaith visit to all the houses of worship in Singapore, They visited synagogue, they visited temples and all churches. So they bring back a very good feedback from especially from those who are engaged with the program. So this is where we should actually impose to students and youngsters to be more understand and more focused on what is tolerance in faith all about. So that's all from my view.
Thank you. Okay, I think we should really stop here. Time is really running out. It's like a full 3-hour discussion. I would just say a few words. Number one, of course, to thank all of you and thank, of course, Jasser and our distinguished commentators. Number two, if I may repeat by saying that I think Institut Darul Ehsan and in particular Center for Nation Building Studies is working on the 2 projects, and we are looking out for people to contribute directly or indirectly. As I said earlier on, we need to connect the dots. This is not the first discussion. This may be the first discussion that I organize or IDE organize on this topic, but others have discussed it before. Some have gone even further in doing some concrete works. We simply need to connect the dots, to have some kind of a depository of what has been done and bring people together. And the next time we meet, I think we are not going to talk like this, but we will be more specific in certain areas. Some people want to do sharing of common values. Some people want to inject more work or improve some of the work that FGIS or MBM and other people has been doing. Some people may want to go into education. Some people may want to go into law and policies. As I said, there are already some good works everywhere, not only in the country, in the region, and also elsewhere on the international forum. We need to translate that into Malaysian context. We need to make it real and practical for all of us. Some of us may then carry on and do training for local leaders, training of people who manage the house of worship, training for jawatan kuasa kampung, so that you don't offend people from other religion. I mean, there are a long list of things that we need to do. And again, I'm saying, we are not starting it. We are simply connecting the dots. We want to strengthen. We want to add value, and hopefully, things will be better, inshallah. So, thank you everyone for coming. Please adjourn upstairs for lunch. Sila.
Before we adjourn, let me call upon Saudara Arifin Munir, our Senior Manager for Research, to present our token of appreciation to the discussants. Please, we have some books. Let us call Dato Abdul Jalil to receive some token from us. Thank you, Dato. John, thank you very much. Timing, thank you very much for your continuous support to us. And Saudara Yusmadi, hope to see you again, and Uthaya, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have lunch served upstairs. You have to walk up